We're live. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what that meant. G'day, Noelle.
Good day.
Thank you for being on my little show.
You're welcome. It's not that little.
Yeah, it's all relative.
That's right.
Are you on YouTube? Do you have a podcast?
I do not have a podcast, nor am I on YouTube. I mean, there are videos of me on YouTube, but I don't have a channel.
I heard Dave Rubin say there are now more podcasts than people, which I thought was good. Remember when podcasts were a thing, like becoming a thing? When was that?
The first one I ever listened to was Serial.
Yeah.
Yeah. With the guy who was potentially falsely accused of... Remember that one? No. Oh, it was really gripping. I thought for briefly about starting a podcast maybe 5 or 6 years ago, and I was going to call it the last podcast the world needs.
The lost?
Because the last.
Oh, okay.
Because it was already so flooded. Then I thought, yeah, if I don't think the world needs it, why am I going to do it?
Yeah. You live in California?
Mm-hmm.
Where, like city, or I don't want to out you, but whereabouts
not far
you
from
live?
Thomas Aquinas College, so between Santa Barbara and Los Angeles. Yeah.
Has California got as bad as everyone tells me, or no?
Well, we're kind of buffered from it because of the TC community. There's a lot of Catholics out there, and we didn't have it as badly as people who I know who live closer to LA. Like they would go to the parks, and the cops would come with like nets and like put them over there. It's kidding, but they would get in trouble for taking their kids to the park. And I don't think that my town, I didn't hear stories like that. Although I think we were close to. Do you remember that story when there was a paddleboarder and the police came and just waited for him to come back to shore so that they could
arrest him?
I don't know what they did. If they arrested him or gave him a citation or something, but
because he was paddleboarding.
He was paddleboarding, and you can't do that. It was this stark image of this person all alone at sea, and they're like, "Yeah, that's not okay."
See, Australia was like that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I think the difference between Australia and here is everyone is leftist media in Australia. And you don't really have a media contingent, powerful and big enough to kind of sway a large majority of people.
Right.
You have Sky News, which I guess is doing things, but every time I see them, they're talking about American politics.
So are there any people in Australia or any contingent of people that are skeptical of that narrative? And
They were, but they are quickly sidelined as crazy.
Okay.
And you can do that when you have all of the media outlets on your side.
Full control.
Yeah. So they were just written off as crazy, and they were able to be seen as crazy.
Yeah.
My parents thought we were crazy for not getting the jab.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they care about us. I mean, they cared about our kids, but they had. It was weird when I had a conversation with them. I could tell that, we were drinking two different Kool-Aids, maybe.
Yeah.
Because they said to me. They said two things that struck me. They said they talked about how COVID had shut down all these small businesses. I'm like, well, it's really the laws, right, that your government implemented.
Policy, yeah.
And they said, but they're doing what's best for us. I can't imagine an American worth their weight that would say about the government.
They've
Unless
got our
on the
best
left,
at heart.
They're doing
a lot of
what's
people
best for us.
said that, right?
Yeah.
I think it was hard to reconcile the idea that there was something more sinister going on when there was such a mainstream narrative that was so dominant. And so if you're someone who really trusts that and historically have believed them to be of goodwill, then it's easier to buy into.
I suppose what I find interesting, though, is you're right. A lot of people would have said they're doing what's best for us. But my family tend to be quite conservative in their views. So it was strange for me to hear them say that.
Right.
They also said something like... They're doing what's best for us. That was the thing. That was the main thing. And I just thought, I don't know anyone that I like that would say that about the government.
Right.
Do you think things have come? I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot here. I don't know how much you've read about this stuff, but do you think things have come to light that have shown that this was?
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, it's one of those things where I think the memory holding is real. So people can, if it's 2 years later, they go, oh, yeah, I was really adamantly said that this did not come from a lab and that the vaccine will stop the spread. And
then get banned on YouTube for saying otherwise.
Yeah, right. And then a couple of years later when it comes out undeniable, and a lot of us knew at the time that those were lies, right? You just it was kind of obvious, I think.
Yeah.
And then I think when it comes to light later, it's rare that I think that people look back and say, okay, I was wrong.
Yeah.
It's more just like I have a healthy distance from this. I probably didn't believe that too strongly, or maybe I just don't want to think about it too much, or but the cognitive distance was bizarre. And I think that I wrote a piece about it. I had this weird experience. I was giving a talk in San Jose, which is a pretty progressive area, Northern California, at a Catholic church. And there was mass and then dinner and then my talk. And the mass, I went with a friend from college and we didn't wear masks. It was early 2021. So people were still pretty masky, but I don't know, there was a mix of ideas about that at that time already. And most people were masked. And then at dinner, we sat down with this nice older couple chatting. The husband got up to get wine and the wife looked at me and her eyes narrowed and she said, "Why weren't you wearing a mask in mass?" And I just kind of laughed because I'm not used to someone. It was so startling. And she mimicked my laugh back to me with venom. She's like,
"Oh, wow." I missed anger. It. Did you know her?
No. We just sat down with them randomly. It was just like, let's all sit down and eat. And I said, "Why were you threatened by me? I was probably 20 feet away from you in mass. We're 2 feet away from each other right now eating dinner.
Yeah.
Do you not see that this does not make sense?"
Right.
It was so bizarre. And I was thinking about it a lot afterwards. And I realized, I think that there is something it's a very human temptation that when you're given someone to disdain or even hate, like a group of people, they're wrong. You're more attached to that sense of hatred than you are to your desire to discover what's true, right? And so it becomes really hard to reevaluate and see your own self and your own thought processes with objectivity. And I think that kind of tribalism really feeds, deception.
I was in Kroger the other day and they still have the big glass wall between you and the big plastic wall. And I said, "What the hell is this?" Yeah. And she agreed. She's like, "Yeah, it's so stupid."
It's so stupid.
Why?
It is so stupid. Do you remember there was one Thanksgiving where the government said, or CDC or somebody said, "Okay, you can eat outside with your family, but don't have more than this many people and put your mask back on between bites."
Oh my God.
Yeah.
It's hard because a lot of us, I imagine most people didn't have access to like first-hand sources or primary sources about what was happening. And we just kind of had a sense. For me, it was just being told what to do. Like, I don't like being told what to do. I think if the government told me not to get the vaccine, I would have got it in a black, dark alley somewhere.
Yeah.
Just don't like being told what to do.
Yeah. And the coercion, the censorship, that was,
Well, it is weird. Like, again, back to YouTube, like during the Black Lives Matter riots and George Floyd, if you had been critical of BLM back then, I think you would have been close to getting shut down.
Yeah.
You do it now, and I don't think they care as much. It's almost like they decide...
It's not the pet issue of the day quite as much
pet issues. Whereas now COVID, like, I don't think they care about that. So, like, what do they care about now? It's like...
Climate.
Climate? Is it climate?
That'll be the next, I think, government-orchestrated emergency might be climate.
Yeah.
I've been saying that for 2 years, though, so I don't know when it's going to happen. But they are amping up that narrative. I do find that the talk around climate is getting more alarmist.
Yeah,
even than before.
Especially this month. It was the hottest month on record, apparently, like globally. So they're really ramping it up right now.
So you wrote a book called Awake, Not Woke. And Thursday, if you could put a link in the description to this excellent book, what was the genesis of it? And what's it about?
I'd started writing about the woke movement around 2018. I think I just...
Wow.
Yeah. I think I just found that there was something far more than politics going on. That, obviously there's a redefinition of what a human person is, but also I hate the feeling of being manipulated. And it felt like it was operating so much on the manipulation of people's goodwill and compassion. I think it manipulates you in three ways: through your pity, through fear, and then through force. Right? And
what is it?
The woke movement.
Okay, I want to back up just real quick. Could you give us like a real brief history on that term?
Yeah. It originally was, I think, a term that was good. It originated around racial injustice. So in the early 1900s, like 1920s, I want to say, but I'm not certain about that. Black people would say, stay woke, as a way of telling each other, be aware of your surroundings, be aware of,
I didn't realize it went all the way back to around then.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I'm terrible with dates, but it could have been the 40s.
But it wasn't,
it
wasn't 1995 though.
No.
Yeah. I only started hearing about it 5 years ago or so.
Well, it got not reinvented, but it resurfaced in the culture. I think it was I'm going to say, to my memory so bad, but there was a singer who had a refrain in some song saying something about stay woke, stay woke. And then the movement, I think, intellectually got kind of galvanized around in the late 80s, early 90s, intersectionality, Kimberly Crenshaw, writers like that.
What's up?
Got the singer, Childish Gambino.
Oh,
Stay
thank
woke.
you. Stay woke.
Stay
What
woke.
year? What year?
2016.
Okay.
It's in Redbone.
Okay. So the woke movement was already galvanized before then, but I think George Floyd is obviously when most people started really hearing and thinking and talking about it. Trayvon Martin, I think that's when BLM movement really came on the scene. But what was the question?
I guess a brief history of the term woke, because at some point it went to being like a term of derision.
Right.
And that seems to be the more, at least in my circles, the
more
more
of a
popular.
pejorative, yeah. Right, but the intellectual ideas have major support.
Yeah. Okay. So good. Thank you for giving us that little history on the term. So then you said like it works through, and you said pity and some other things.
Pity, fear, and force. So pity, obviously appealing to people's compassion. Fear, fear of losing human respect. I think that fear of being shamed or canceled or censored or something.
And it has far more to do than just race, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
So I remember back when they were trying to push for so-called gay marriage, I remember there being adverts, so like stay on the right side of history. And I remember feeling, I hate it so much, and you can tell me why, but I felt really coerced in that. Like, if you don't want to be an out-of-date, bigoted idiot, you got to join the cool guys.
Yeah, it's so stupid. I remember people saying, like, analogizing it to racial injustice and saying, the people who were racist back then, you're going to look like that in the future if you're not supportive of the redefinition of marriage, trying to put them together, which is, it's effective because you don't want to have been the racist looking back. But yeah, no, it's a terrible, being on the right side of history is a terrible phrase.
All right. So where does it come from and how did it develop in the United States?
That phrase or the woke movement?
I guess the woke movement.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I think a lot of time I talk about this, people say, define what you mean. Like, what do we mean when we talk about woke? And other than just, stay awake to social injustice.
Right. I think that's on the surface what they want people to think it means, just being aware of injustice and being a normal human person who wants to fight injustice. But that's not actually what it means. It's a whole host of ideological premises. So I think it means adopting the correct political consciousness, which obviously even that phrase has its roots in Marxism, where you filter. If I'm going to say it the most bluntly, I think it is a rejection of God in favor of giving yourself authority. And then eventually that turns into the state authority. And eventually I think it turns into authority giving authority to the devil. And that's a provocative statement. But I feel like your nice woke Aunt Susan or your neighbor down the street, they are not like, hey, I want you to give authority to the devil or even to the state necessarily. I think they probably are operating at a different level. So I don't think that any person who's woke has the full cognizance of that structure that I just said. But I do think that's what's animating the movement fundamentally.
So then what's the difference between being aware of social injustices and wanting to rectify them, which all Catholics ought to do, and the bad kind of work that you want to talk about?
Well, because being aware of social injustice, I think, is only a tool for the woke movement in order to. So, if you historically, it has its roots, obviously, in I think the fallen man, obviously, but Marx, Hegel, but Marcuse, and the newer Gramsci and Rudi Deutsche and all the Frankfurt guys, they realized pretty quickly that being aware of social injustice was a good tool for spreading new fractures in society across broader categories. So whereas Marx just had the categories of level of class, they realized that's not enough to seed revolution, that you can still you're not going to be angry enough by class differences, especially when you have family life that can give you happy satisfaction in life, so, and you have your faith. So your faith can teach you, I don't have as much as that guy, but I have a good life and I can suffer well my circumstances and they can be redeemed. And, it sort of is a buffer against revolution. It's not destabilized enough. And so they realized pretty early on, you have to target the family, you have to target the faith. And also, we have to see division across broader categories and into identity, right? And so that's when you get really the racial, where it's Martin Luther King Jr. or somebody who is maybe an old school, capital L liberal, was going to be asking people to become aware of social injustice in the good way. And then you have, I think, something like the BLM movement, who is saying, you have to be aware of it in the sense that you need to understand that you are defined by a social oppression, that's the definition of who you are. So one of the things I'll say sometimes is that I think one of the shifts is the difference in definition of the human person being we are defined as Christians, understanding that we are through universals, or even as non-Christians, we're rational animals, right? So we are defined in ways that unite us as human beings. As Christians, we're defined because we're made in the image of God. So we're defined by the love of God, which gives us a gospel mission to go spread that good news. For the woke, they're not defined by the love of God, they're defined by the hatred of mankind. And that gives a contra-gospel message to go out and spread the bad news to people that you might think you're living a happy life, but you're actually miserable. I mean, that's rife through the literature, right? Raising people's consciousness is helping them to see that they are
dissatisfied.
That they're hated or they're miserable, they're oppressed, or that they have privilege, right? And that they are, unbeknownst to them, part of the problem. With the word privilege not being, I want to invite you to be grateful, but rather I want to impugn you with guilt, right? It's not an invitation to gratitude. And then there's a call to become an activist. Once you have that right awareness, then you have a duty then to become an activist for the sake of justice.
Yeah, when you say things like that, it makes it sound like there is a group of mustachioed evil men and men who identify as women and people of all colors sitting in a room together, hatching a plan for the destabilization of society. It might be that. I kind of hope it is that. That makes it way more interesting than we're all just buffoons who don't know what we're doing. Do you think that's the case, or how is it proliferating, if not?
I think it's proliferating because the ideas really appeal to our things that all human beings are naturally tempted by. And so it creates a situation where it kind of proliferates itself, but it certainly is deeply embedded in the academy, right? If you read queer theory and critical race theory literature, that all these ideas are very radical and they've been out in the open. It's just that most people don't read that stuff because it's almost impenetrably written in some ways. It's, I think, probably for a point, but
you see that classic interview between Matt Walsh and that university professor, and he asked him the difference between sex and gender. I'm not sure if you ever watched What is a Woman?
Oh, I did, yeah.
And the guy was just spewing things that made no sense at all. And Matt just kept asking him very simple questions and he imploded.
Right.
I think that's what happens.
And he wanted to kick him out.
Yeah, to your point about like the jargon that's impenetrable and you say for a reason.
Right. Well, because if your goal is not to arrive at the truth, but to, align yourself with a certain movement that can then be powerful, right? I think the goal is not truth, it's power.
Yeah.
And so you have to constantly be manipulating even your own words and then afraid of somebody saying something that's simply true.
Yeah. It was, who wrote the book? Joseph Pieper. He wrote a book, The Abuse of Language, The Abuse of Power, something like that. And yeah, the idea, I suppose, if I cannot communicate objective truth to you, if objective truth doesn't exist, or if I'm unable to communicate to another mind, then what is the point of speech? Yeah. And if there is no truth, it might be manipulation. Yeah. So I speak in a way to make you do the things that I want you to do. And it might be conducive to both of our goods, and it might not be, and who cares anyway? So yeah, so speech, redefining speech becomes a point of power. And you think of all the deviant sexual acts that the church wants to condemn, and it's really interesting to see how we've chosen different language. So adultery, which is a very serious sin, is now cheating, like it's a game. Or sodomy, which is a very ugly word for an ugly behavior, is maybe like gay, or love is love. Abortion is healthcare. Yeah. Self-abuse goes from like masturbation to maybe even self-care. Like we have to manipulate the language.
Gender-affirming care.
Gender-affirming care for child mutilation. Wow.
Yeah. That's why I think one of the best things to do is to name things as they are, right? And there's a spiritual dynamic. I'm not the first one to point this out, obviously, but that God creates reality through his word, and we identify reality through ours. And in the woke movement, you're creating reality through your own word. So it's another, I think there's so many ways in which it's this self-deification. And I think that's one key one.
I understand what you mean, but I'd love you to flesh that out for us.
Well, God made the world through his word, right? His word creates.
I get that bit. And then I get that we participate in recognizing things nature.
We are trying to correspond our thought and our words to what is real.
Right.
So words do that. And that creates a shared inner life. Like we can have a shared inner life if we have that understanding that our words should correspond to reality. But in the woke movement, if I can change reality through changing a word, like you just elucidated, but also with my pronouns, then I'm creating new substance, the idea with the power of my word. And then I can demand that other people affirm that.
Yes.
Because it's tenuous, obviously I think ultimately, but that's why it becomes totalitarian by nature. It's because it's doing violence to reality and violence to language.
That's good, because what is it like, to get really into the weeds? What the difference between a term and a concept, right? A concept is the intellectual abstraction of the essence of a thing. And so when I give a term to you, it's like I'm giving you a package with something in it that we both recognized. But if I start making up terms or attributing terms to things that historically haven't meant those things, then I'm at best being confusing. And maybe at worst, as you say, seeking to have power. So how is it when you say self-deification in the woke movement? What do you mean by that? I get it, but I'd love you to talk more about it.
Right. Well, I think that's one example. Another one, so in my book, I identify three main dogmas that I think the woke movement, how they operate. One is that and this is in simple, very non-academic terms. My book is not very intensely academic. I wanted it to be accessible, and I'm not intensely academic. So, but the first one is group over person. So that's referring to like the collectivizing of the human person, that your identity becomes more absorbed in your political identity than as a person. And then the second one is will over reason. And I think that one is particularly self-deifying, that our will, it goes back to the word create flesh idea, but that our will triumphs over reason in the sense that we don't have a stable human nature. We don't look at the world as being intelligible, and we are trying to receive it and then understand and then conform our will to it, like you would when you're striving for virtue. But rather that through my will, I can dominate reality, even to the point of bodily defiance. I think it's a very Gnostic idea, right? And then the third one is power over authority. So it's a rejection of any objective authority for the sake of power. And ironically, I think it leads to people who are really prone to authoritarianism. So I think at first, that third one, it operates first by making you the author of your own life. So that connects with obviously your will being able to dominate, your words being able to self-create. But it also makes you very prone to the power of a tyrant, right? Because if you don't have an objective measure, every sense of authority that we have in this world has to be derivative, except for God's, right? That if you are given an office, you're given a commission from above in some way. If you're a father, you are given your child from God, and that it holds you to a standard, and it invites you to be reverent, right? I think there's a real connection between right authority and reverence. And if we try to hold authority absolutely, becomes a matter of domination. So I think it's self-deifying in many ways. There's an interesting, Richard Dawkins, do you know that? He's a scientist. Yeah, biologist. He had some interesting interview that I just saw a clip of recently, and he's atheist, right? Yeah. And he was saying that there's a connection between Catholics' understanding of transubstantiation and the transgender movement. That in transubstantiation, all of the accidents remain, the substance is transformed, and that's what the transgender movement is telling people that they can do, that all of the accidents of physical properties of their body can remain, and yet the substantively, they've utterly transformed themselves, which is like a shot at Catholics, right? It is in a way, it's a shot at Catholics. But so if Catholics and Orthodox and other Protestants who believe in transubstantiation or something similar are incorrect, then I guess that's why I've heard trans people say things, or trans people who are favorable to the movement will say, "Oh, okay, like a man can't become a woman, but like that can become God." So they use it as a kind of a mockery. But I'd not heard that before. And I actually assumed that he was saying it as a way of not ascribing any validity to the Catholic Church, but I thought he was saying in a way that was kind of critical.
No, he is. Okay. He is. It's interesting that, first of all, it's interesting, the glory of the world, because Dawkins was, the even fact that you had to ask me if he's an atheist, or just to clarify, shows just how quickly we forget about people who are really popular in 2006 and write a book that's philosophically spineless.
As I asked it, I felt like an idiot because I'm like,
no. Well, this is the point though. We want to use language and we don't want to pretend to know what we don't know. And, but it was Ed Fazer who said that Richard Dawkins wouldn't know the difference between metaphysics and Metamucil. I like that. And he's probably right. But it is interesting that these people who are enemies of the church are also like allies in a way, as they stare this insanity in the face, and we wouldn't agree with them maybe on a lot of things, but then, yeah. Did you say something? No, sorry. Yeah. So that is interesting.
Yeah, well, and that's happening more and more, right? And you see that with like the feminists and fighting the transgender.
Are we seeing that?
I mean, we are seeing it to some degree. There are certain feminists who have stood up and said, this is not okay. We've been fighting for women's rights, and you're just going to tell me that their women isn't eradicated, or that. And
what's funny is if I can identify as a woman now, and then in an hour identify as a man, like, and it seems to me that if they don't want to say that, they're going to have to show me how their worldview is more substantial and coherent, which it isn't.
Right.
So if I can just do that, if I can just say I'm a woman right now, and then in an hour decide I'm not, then I can then identify with the hardships of women, and I can say that stand-up females aren't that funny, and I can say that as a woman, like I'm saying as a woman. You know? And Trump could run as a first female president next time around. That could work well for him. But you say that,
really be a signal scramble.
What does that mean?
I mean, because they hate Trump. But if he said, "Well, I'm actually a woman now," they would have to believe him.
But of course they wouldn't, which would just show the incoherence of the whole.
Well, I think no one believes them. I mean, I think every progressive person, even the most progressive person, understands that Leah Thomas is a man, right?
Yeah, I don't know.
I think it's a giving over to ourselves to a lie, right? And the deepest core of ourselves.
Yeah, we have to lie.
You have to lie, and I think it's I mean, maybe a mentally ill person or something would know that or believe that Leah Thomas is really a woman, but I think progressives all know that.
Yeah.
Right?
So if you ask them, are you lying? What would they say?
They would say, no, I'm not lying, because this is, because the ideology tells them that this is possible and that's the compassionate position, is to affirm that. And so I think they would say, I'm not lying. I'm choosing to believe this.
Yeah.
I don't know if they'd say I'm choosing to believe this, but I think that that's what's happening in their mind, right? I'm going to make a choice. Norm Macdonald has the best sketch on this. Have you seen his?
I love Norm Macdonald.
He's my favorite.
He's everyone's favorite.
Yeah, I know.
If Norm Macdonald's not your favorite, it's because you haven't watched him. yeah, that's right.
He's a hilarious. He was being interviewed. I don't remember who, and he asked him, "What do you think about the transgender movement?" And he's like, "I absolutely love transgender people. I love Caitlyn Jenner. So brave, very brave." And he's like, "But the only problem I have is when transgender people are serial killers." He's like, "But it's hard. It's hard because I love the part of them that's transgender so much, so brave. But I don't care for serial killers." And he's like, "There's only been a couple of them in history. One fella, lady."
I love him.
So he's showing that process of like, I gotta correct myself. I'm saying the wrong thing.
Right, and he's showing. You gotta look it up. He's showing the insanity of it.
Yeah,
he's mocking it. Yeah, through irony. Yeah. No, I will. So in your book, what aspect of wokeism did you focus on, or was there like a particular like gender, race? Were there something in particular that you?
I did both. So yeah, I signed contracts for the book 2 weeks before the quarantine started in 2020. And then all my kids came home. I was sharing a computer. Everyone was like homeschooling and in a different room. And I just created a little makeshift desk next to my bed and it was chaos. And then the riots started. It was really bizarre because I wrote it in about 6 months, and that was a year where everything was kind of coming apart, and it just felt like it lends a certain urgency to the book because I felt like, oh, I'm seeing the effects of this playing out. But I did I focused on race, feminism, transgenderism. But I try to make it, so it's simply laid out. The first section is the origins, the history of the movement. The second section is like the main tenets of the movement. The third is the methods of indoctrination. So like sexual revolution, education, activism, and critical theory over critical thinking. And then the last section is restoration. So 4 parts. In other words, I cover all those identities.
I've said in the past that engaging with the world, and by the world I'm going to mean like the leftist woke people, I liken that to a serious conversation with somebody who I gradually discover is hammered drunk. Right, and it's because you talk to people and they're like, well, I kind of think like if you're happy, you should be able to live together, and like people shouldn't be stuck in a marriage if like someone's and so you're like, okay, I'm tracking, and they'll say, well, women should have authority over her own body. Like, okay, I see, I disagree, but I see, and then it's like also pregnant men, and you're like, oh shit, and then I want to go, but that has caused me to just think, oh God, how much have I accepted from the woke left that I still accept, that I have to seriously question? That scares me a little bit.
Yeah.
How was that with you?
I gave a talk recently about fatherhood, which is something I've been writing about more and thinking about a lot. But I think that there are certain ways that we have absorbed propaganda without realizing it, right? I mean, everyone, as a woman, like growing up, you are a default feminist. You almost can't help but be, because it's everything you see around you. It's every message you get. Early in marriage, I remember just feeling like we got pregnant, or I got pregnant. We within about 6 months after we got married, and then and it was sort of not a surprise, but we thought we knew how to practice NFP. We didn't know what we were doing, and it was. I'm so glad that happened. But I was 24, all of a sudden home with a baby, and I just felt like I'm wasting away. Who am I? Like, my friends are in law school and all this stuff. And it was just the messages of the world, had shaped me. And I was too young to have kind of any virtue muscle to kind of counteract that, or, so it really had to it got burned out of me fairly quickly with life and family life, but. If
you don't mind me asking, what did that do to your relationship with your husband? If you feel like a victim in a relationship with a man you love, but there's competing messages that really you're kind of enslaved to this. Yeah,
no, it was not a dramatic strain, but it certainly was a strain. And I remember realizing it more after the fact. Like there was a really particular, I don't normally have like dramatic moments where I have big realizations. It's usually slow, I'm a slow processor, so I usually have to think about something for a long time before I really start to absorb it or be convicted by it. But I remember one day he was coming home from work, and I had babies and toddlers and all this stuff, and I realized all of a sudden I put myself in his shoes, which obviously you should be doing that all the time in marriage, but I was an idiot. And I remember saying to myself, what would it feel like to be coming home from a day of work and your wife is giving you a litany of complaints about her day? And I realized that would feel horrible. And I don't think I did that every day, but I probably did it knee-jerk regularly. And I just remember thinking, like, why would I treat this person I love so much like that? Who would I want to come home to? And I realized I would want to come home with someone who was grateful to see me and pleasant and able to carry her cross without suffering poorly. So it just was a simple realization, but it all of a sudden just dawned on me very forcefully. And maybe I'm sure many other women realized that much earlier, but we were probably, 6 or so years into our marriage when I realized that. And we had a series of those. I remember at one point, things felt hard, just the everyday life of little kids. And after we got everyone to bed, we were talking, and all of a sudden we just had this moment of like this, we are either going to live a Catholic life in the small, unglamorous details that don't seem that you can write off as insignificant. We're either going to fight the battle in those little details, or we're not going to fight it at all. And so if we believe this, why aren't we fighting it in those minute details? That's where it really matters, right?
So I see, like, it dawned on you, like, specifically, like, I'm put myself in his shoes, but like, at what point, or maybe it was the same time, did it dawn on you that the propaganda you were receiving as a young girl had contributed to that?
Yeah.
And then I'd love just to know your thoughts on feminism in general.
Yeah. I remember, it dawned on me, I think, at one point, because, and this is maybe balancing off what I was saying before, we really have had an annoyingly blessed marriage. And it's been, we've had our annoyances, but it's been a very deeply happy marriage. And even at the early years, I remember having this realization of, I feel like my husband should be on the cover of Time magazine or something. Like, this is what a heroic man looks like. He is giving and helpful and loving, and and I remember thinking, why have I struggled so much with the idea of being a stay-at-home mom? Why have I struggled with the idea of my husband being in a more traditionally masculine, fatherly role? Why was I resistant to that? This is a life of joy. This is just, I realized that this is a beautiful life. And the fact that I had any hesitation about it or any struggle with it began to seem very much like my mind's been infiltrated. It was interesting, actually. I wrote about in Theology of Home 1 anecdote of my husband coming home, and he had a bag of groceries under his arm, and he takes the baby, pours me a glass of wine, and he starts cooking dinner. And I remember just looking at him like I was exhausted, and I was just like, you are a hero. This is an image of heroic manliness. And I wrote about that in Theology of Home 1. And there we had one review that had a critical, we generally had good reviews, but someone wrote in some periodical in the UK, a review of Theology of Home 1, and highlighted that anecdote and was saying, this is kind of silly. It's obviously her husband should be helping her when she's got a baby. Like, of course he should. And I just thought, how ungrateful do you have to be? And think about it. It flipped it with, if you change the sexes, if a man said, I came home and my wife gave me a sweet kiss after a hard day and let me vent and was so sweet and she was so amazing, was expressing gratitude. And another man said, of course she should do that. That's how pathetic that you're grateful to your wife for that. We would never say that, but we're used to expressing that sort of cynical ingratitude towards men.
One phrase that I hate hearing is happy wife, happy life, because it makes you seem, you as the wife, like a petulant child.
Yeah.
Who needs to be kept satiated so that everyone will be calm.
I don't like that phrase just because it seems like it's like it should be on a sign and someone's like word art or something. It just seems cheesy to me.
Yeah.
Happy wife, happy life. But yeah, that's right. I didn't think about that.
So then when you started to realize that, because so many thoughts. When you started to realize that feminism was a problem and it had infiltrated you, did you then become open to being even more critical of feminism that you were in that one moment? Okay, this whole thing has to be torn out root and branch, or no?
No, that's a good question. I think I felt convicted about, I would not have said I was a feminist, I don't think, even at the time. I think, I was very pro-life and Orthodox Catholic, but I think it made me realize how pervasive that message is, that it's, that it can colonize all of our minds pretty quickly. And I think it made me want to be more vocal about, just in a helpful way, like, let's help other women realize, okay, you've been sold a bill of goods. This is a very happy life. And if you keep going down this road with these ideas, A, it's going to be hard to have a really happy marriage. But B, you might even reject marriage, right? And I think we're seeing that now. A lot of women who are wishing they had babies and they're 40 and, and looking back with regret. But I think my heart really goes out to them because in a way they just were lied to. So I don't know if I guess your question is, did it make me become more anti-feminist?
Or it's one thing to see, I was lied to about. Maybe it's like traditional roles in the family, say. But then did that realization lead you to be further critical of other things that maybe are just totally accepted as common sense today?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know if that was like the moment of nexus about it, but I think there was probably a series of moments where the lies became more obvious, and then it just felt like, okay, there's so many messages swimming through the culture that are speaking into things that are really disordered understandings of what a human person is in multiple ways, and how powerful that media capture has been.
It's even in the church, I find, right, like. I like that, putting yourself in the other person's shoes, right? Like if a wife lovingly came on to her husband and he's like, no, I had no good reason to reject her, crush her. And you'd be like, what the hell is wrong with you? But somehow, even in the church, we have this idea that, well, the woman can do that to the man and that's okay because the man's the problem.
Yeah.
So it's colonized people in the church.
That's true. And there's something, I mean, I think that maybe one thing that makes it complicated is that I think I agree with what you're saying about that injustice or that double standard with men and women. But then again, there are real differences that probably give rise to that as being, it's more fitting for a man to respond to the wife in that way. I mean, a wife should respond positively as well, but it makes sense to me that a woman would be more crushed in that moment than a man, doesn't it? And not just because I think of cultural messaging, but I think because of something in who a man is and who a woman is, that a man is more prone to be ready anytime for
rejection. Yeah, well, that too. The other thing. Oh, I see.
Yeah, men also learn rejection
really quickly. I mean, that's how you get married. You have to
you get
pursue
rejected
1,000 women and get rejected continually.
That's right.
Whereas I don't know if women have that in them.
Right. And it would be.
But then also there's the masculine sex drive.
Right.
So there's that.
Right.
Yeah.
So it'd feel like, for a man to reject a woman, there's something weird going on, right? It's something deeply weird.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, obviously I agree that women should be.
And that's why I also said, I made that caveat without any good reason.
Right,
Obviously, there are reasons to abstain. I kind of get the sense that a lot of Catholics still believe that the woke left is friendable.
Yeah.
And I think that's true. Like I had these T-shirts that came out for Gay Month, and it said "Reclaim the Month" with a Sacred Heart. I mean, how inoffensive can you be? And Catholics were pulling their hair out. They're going to hate what I'm going to drop next June.
Do we have it already?
No, but it's going to be so offensive. But in the best way. I'll tell you about it later.
Piquing my curiosity.
Yeah. But just pulling their hair out, like as if you would capitalize on this month to make fun of people. I'm like, well, first of all, I don't want to waste 90% of my breath explaining to you that I'm not making fun of people because you should know that, or you're an idiot and not worth talking to. But two, I'm fine making fun of people who are trying to perpetuate debauchery and licentiousness in our culture. Fine with that. But
Well, it's making fun of a movement, right? It seems like you're making more than an
Obviously,
individual.
no Catholic would ever make fun of anybody. The same-sex attraction or gender dysphoria, like they need help, we love them. That's all we've ever said.
Right.
But it's almost like the woke left are telling us, well, if you just keep saying those nice things without any criticism, that's the only way you can be loving. It's like, well, no, there's going to be criticism.
I saw that a lot in 2020, 2021, where on a Theology Poem Instagram, we would get angry Catholic mommies who thought, if we criticize Pride Month or CRT or something, that, we are the exact reaction you're talking about. And in some ways, we get that a lot less now. Maybe those ladies just all unfollowed us or just we, have called the herd. But I think that there must be more of an awakening, I think, there's more of an awakening broadly, but amongst Catholics too, where they realize, we've been manipulated. You don't agree?
I agree completely. I think the overstep of the woke has risen up the normal people. Like today I see Catholics saying, of course, it's not a marriage. It's ridiculous. Of course it shouldn't be something that we recognize as a state. And of course abortion is murder. And of course sodomy is gross. And of course you should find two men kissing disgusting. But I think 15 years ago, we wouldn't have said those things.
No.
Whereas today I think, obviously. Yeah. So it feels like both people are becoming more vocal.
Right.
So it might be the misstep of the woke left that has caused the sane people, as I would see it, to be like, okay, no, done. It's not a man. It's not a woman. Yeah.
Now, do you have friends who are woke? Are you able to?
What does woke mean?
What does woke mean?
I've already asked you that, but
yeah,
it's hard to now distinguish the woke from the Democrats, isn't it? I mean, Republicans suck as well. I'm not cheering on the Republicans, but if someone is woke, they're not voting Republican. So it's easy, unless they're like an older folk who kind of still aligns with the old way Democrats used to be. But so
I feel like I know people who vote consistently Democrat, but they think transgenderism is insane. And
so I don't understand why they would continue to vote for Democrat.
I think part of it is the same thing we were talking about earlier, that I think our hatred for our political enemy is more compelling to us than almost anything else in that decision.
So the question for you I would ask is, when does someone become woke? Because you have friends who think transgenderism is insane. So presumably you don't think they're woke, although maybe they're for abortion and maybe they're for something else.
Yeah. So they're Well, some are even pro-life, but they say they're pro-life, but they always vote Democrat.
What's the least I need to do to be woke in your book? Like, if you knew something about me,
that's a good question.
Yeah, what's the least I would need to accept of woke doctrine? If you'd be like, yeah, I think like you're a woke friend of mine, or
I think if someone was, well, the first thing that comes to mind if you were someone who would be affirming of the flags, right? BLM flag, Pride flag, trans flag. That seems like, okay, you're woke. I think if you would make a conscious decision to not, like if somebody asked you, hey, will you hang this flag in your window or something, and you would say, no, I would not, then you're probably not woke.
These friends of yours who think trans stuff is crazy, would they hang the flags?
I think they would probably do a women's march.
Yeah.
That's a good question. I think they'd probably put the black square on their Instagram.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think for me, just since I'm still not really sure the edges of what the definition of woke means, I suppose I would think that, honestly, I would say someone's not woke based on what they chose not to do. It's almost like if someone's not just readily going on with this rush of enthusiasm from the left about gay flags and BLM stuff, and if there was any kind of resistance, I'm like, okay, that's cool. When I think of someone who's woke, I think someone who's just kind of given themselves over to the current of this rushing stream to destruction.
Well, maybe here's a distinction is that woke implies activism, right?
Okay.
You have to become an activist. Woke is not just a theory. It demands action. So
which is cool. Action's cool.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's so much cooler than just living on a cul-de-sac and being a loser and not caring about anything. So I get the appeal.
Right. It's a shortcut to virtue, right?
Shortcut to virtue.
I did that, yeah.
Yeah, so I get that. So do I have friends who are woke? I don't want to be close friends with anybody who would promote sodomy or these sorts of things. I'd interact with them and I'd be kind to them and I'd want to help them and love them, but I don't associate with people by choice for fun.
But what if it's an old friend?
Okay, good. All right, I've got one in mind. Now, what's the question?
Okay. How do you navigate that?
Well, I would navigate that by not talking about it because I don't think they could handle the conversation. To have the conversation, to ask the question is to be an enemy. Whereas for them, I really, really believe that I'd be open to hearing them out. Like I wouldn't shut down. I wouldn't be defensive. I'd actually just be really interested. But I don't think they could handle the conversation. I think that's how a lot of people on the right of the spectrum feel. They're like, I really am open to this conversation. It just seems nuts to me. Whereas the other person thinks to even like validate that as a reasonable line of questioning is to dialogue with a racist, homophobe, something.
Right. And that's why it's so hard to maintain, because I find pre-2020, those relationships were far easier to navigate. And I think in some ways, my friendships with people who think very differently, we kind of were smugly proud of ourselves. Like, oh, look at us, reached across the aisle and loving each other despite. And then something shifted. And I think that's what you said is exactly right, that to disagree is to be bad. Whereas I think on the right, we have a principle that disagreement doesn't make you an object of evil or an evil person.
The problem with the right too is that it's like this slow drag towards the left. And so you've got Trump seemingly not having much of a problem with trans stuff, with gay stuff, and so you don't want to just look at the woke left and go, ugh, and then jump on the Republican bandwagon for a whole host of reasons either, obviously. To
be reactionary or something.
Yeah. Because they're also being dragged into the insanity. Like, I don't know how many, even people like Ben Shapiro, I would like to hear a full-throated acknowledgement that gay marriage isn't a thing and is bad for society and that sodomy is icky. Yes, it's gross. Like, I would like to hear those sorts of things. But instead, I hear him saying, look, I'm a Jew. I think lots of things are sins. Well,
do you think it's a strategic choice at some point?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's doing a lot of good.
I think you want to have
I'm not impugning the fella, but...
Yeah.
But then see, the problem with being too strategic is if YouTube is the town square where we all hear ideas together and we all choose to be strategic so we don't lose our money, then no one's hearing truth in the town square anymore. No one's hearing something said. Well,
to not lose money, I think is certainly probably compelling a lot of people. But I do think that there is, do you know James Lindsay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I don't know him personally, but
we did a conference together recently, and he's fun. We had a lot of good conversations, but he's very adamant that, and obviously he's an atheist, so he doesn't have these moral convictions, particularly regarding marriage and even abortion. I don't think he would say he's pro-life, but anyway, I'm not sure. But he would say that the way you win and defeat the woke movement is by you have to bring people over who are kind of on the fence, right? Yeah. And you're not going to bring them over by saying, and that the part of the woke strategy is they want us to become so reactionary that we double down on the things that we believe that are going to totally disenfranchise that center. I mean, obviously, there's something distasteful about conservatives always appealing to the center because it, as you say, dilutes our message. But I think his point would be that there is an urgency right now because it's communism
to extend the tent.
We just have to beat it.
What the right is to kind of bring people in.
Right. Yeah. And you don't want to try to win at this, at the expense of your principles, obviously. But anyway, his point is just that there's a strategy on their side to make us become something that is untenable for so many people that we just marginalize ourselves too much, and then they can take all the power.
Yeah, that's a good point.
What
do you think, Thursday?
Sorry,
So the idea, right, is like on the left, there is a clear strategy to kind of unite the clans over there and then to kind of like gaslight those on the right so that they're kind of unwelcoming to people who hold anything less than the purest of
we're talking about purity spiraling in Big Tent?
Yeah, so the idea is like, okay, so on people who aren't woke and want to kind of give people an off-ramp, like this is insane and you can say that. Because I have been heartened to see more conservative commentators put a spotlight on people like J.K. Rowling and others who will stand up against the woke mob, even though they would believe some things that we would consider quite egregious.
Right.
So how do you kind of bring these people into the tent and celebrate them
I think we need a differentiation between giving people an off-ramp and saying that they're in the Big Tent, quote-unquote, Big Tent movement. Because I would pretty strongly object to like even a lot of people who like might be considered conservatives by the majority of probably our audience. I would strongly object to considering them like a voice for conservatism. And so I think what we need to be doing is acknowledging where people get things right, but not calling that conservatism, because if we allow conservatism to be defined by disagreement with insane principles, we actually don't have principles of our own.
Right.
Like I remember the other day, I heard somebody say something like that. So we posted a short about Mormonism, right? Mm-hmm. And somebody said that because it was so aggressive that they were more likely to consider Mormonism now. Mm-hmm. Right. And my immediate thought, I didn't post this or anything, but my immediate thought was, what you've just told me is that you're not thinking for yourself, but you're not letting other people think for you. And you are letting us think for you. You're letting us think for you because you're just saying the opposite of whatever we say. Mm-hmm. And if we make the Big Tent movement just whoever disagrees with the left on one issue, we don't have principles, and therefore it becomes impossible for us to win because we don't have a goal. We don't have a teleology for what we're working towards.
I think that's right.
So there has to be a differentiation between acknowledging when people get things right so that they can have the off-ramp and then welcoming them into the fold.
Praising them.
Well, we just have to make distinctions, and distinctions are crucial. So when feminists fight against the transgender thing, then we say, yes, let's hear you out, give you a voice, give you a platform. But we can also say, bluntly that feminism is not the answer, right? It's in some ways laid the foundations of the transgender movement. But here's a good example of what I think that, I think James is a strong point, is that when there was a conversation that was being had about, I don't remember what happened, but something happened that galvanized some sort of national conversation around the transgender movement. And obviously there's a lot of momentum in fighting that because, for example, detransitioners are really hard to deny, right? They, in their very bodies, testify to the fact that they had fully embraced this movement. And then in their very bodies testify to the horror of it and the pain and the suffering that it causes. And all of a sudden the conversation became about how some government, I think in Uganda, was saying that you're going to go to jail if you're homosexual. And so a lot of people on the left were just like, let's talk about this. Let's talk about this. What's happening in Uganda? And that was a manipulation. And I don't think it's a sacrificing of our principles to say, no, this is what we're talking about right now. You cannot deflect from the fact that you're mutilating children in order to all of a sudden hype up this other thing as a distraction, And so I think that's a real tactic and strategy that we have to be aware of and wary of, right?
Yeah.
Keep the conversation focused on what they're doing rather than letting them put us on the defensive all the time.
It's so hard to believe that
I think we also, before you move on, we need to be sure we differentiate between libertarians and conservatives.
Yeah.
Because I don't think Tim Pool's a conservative.
Right. You know who that is?
I know who he is, but I've actually never listened to his show.
No, I certainly wouldn't call him conservative. Yeah.
I think we have a lot of libertarians who have big platforms who we call conservative because we want big platforms to speak our views.
Yeah.
And that is what dilutes conservatism with libertarianism. And Seamus said this really well when he was on the show, that we're not for small government, we're for effective government. And a lot of times that means it needs to be smaller than it is now. But if you make the principle small government, then where government intervention is necessary, you are throwing it out and throwing out the possibility of it happening.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No. I think that's totally right. And that's, there's an element of the Conservative Party that's just always wanting to go back to Ronald Reagan, and I love Ronald Reagan, but we need to deal with what we're dealing with now.
It's wild to think that child mutilation is something that's widely accepted on the left, when it was the left 20 years ago who were referring to circumcision as mutilation. I don't know if you. I remember being a boy in Australia, and whenever they'd want like a wild story, they'd always choose a yank, because Americans are very dramatic and have these very dramatic. So this guy was getting on and kind of crying about the child abuse of being circumcised, and I was like, oh, that's never really thought of it, but fair enough, I guess. Kind of weird.
I didn't know that the left was decrying that. I mean, it seems like a kind of a natural hippie-ish kind of thing.
Well, maybe I shouldn't say the left.
Can cross categories.
Put it this way, I'm not sure if it was the right. Like, I wouldn't imagine someone who's conservative going on public national television and crying about being abused as a child for that happening.
I would.
Yeah.
You would?
Okay. 100%.
100%. I would do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it is wild that we got here. So grateful to Matt Walsh and the work that he's doing to help put a spotlight on the insanity.
Yeah. Yeah.
People are finding their voice and people are standing up.
Well, and that goes to your point about your June month thing, is that I think that we are so prone to saying like, we have to be concerned with souls, and so we have to treat people with love and kindness and all of these things. But when it's so insane that you have to make a mockery in order to reveal the insanity sometimes, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what Matt Walsh does so effectively.
Well, for so many years I spoke on the topic of pornography, and I would gladly mock pornography. Like, it's a very emasculine action.
It's definition of emasculation, right?
Yeah, like going to a strip club and paying a woman money to pretend to like you.
Right.
While you feel super manly and the big neon sign says gentlemen's. Like, yes, gosh, talk about manipulation and wanting to believe what isn't so.
Yeah.
So I think it's one thing to mock the sin, but obviously, so when I do that, when I mock pornography, I don't tend to have Susan Catholics telling me,
how dare
we
you?
have to love these people. It's like, why? But why would you ever think? They don't think that in that circumstance.
Right. That's a good point.
But they do think it in the trans gay circumstance, because they've bought the belief that your identity is your attraction, or your attraction is your identity, or something.
Right. And a man engaging in pornography is a symbol of oppression in the ideology, right? So they're not sympathetic. Even though, there might be real enslavement there that deserves compassion, and somebody needs to be helped with their struggle. That's a very different category than the person who is enslaved by a different sort of sin.
Because I don't know if it would need to always be that way. I think if the left started talking about like pornosexuals or something, and people started identifying as this and started waving a flag,
right,
and identifying it, like how many seconds are we away from this happening,
right?
And then I started mocking pornography, then I think you'd start to get a lot of people being like, that's just mean. You shouldn't. People have this.
Maybe.
Yeah, we get brainwashed into believing this sort of thing.
I wrote an article about that actually when I had a bunch of backlash because I defended some excellent article that Carl Trueman wrote about Pride Month. And all these women were saying, I think it's okay to accompany my brothers and sisters who have same-sex attraction in pride in a pride parade because I'm walking with them, I'm supporting them. And I just said, would you do that? What if there's like an adulterous male parade or a white supremacy parade? Would you say, well, I hate your white supremacy, but I love you and I want to accompany, we would never, there's so many absurdities.
So what is something from your book that people resonate with the most? So when you give a talk at Franciscan or elsewhere, they come up, is there something specific that you think you put your finger on that hasn't already been said? Or was it more that you just kind of got ahead of the game and published a book on this right when it was taken off? That
I feel like the comment I get the most is that it was more of a generally helpful in helping them see through what was happening. But I guess one thing that I've had strong reactions to positively, and maybe they're negative reactions that I'm just not hearing, but was the idea of, and James talks about this too, but that innocence is a form of dominance. So in chapter 7, I kind of tried to dive into more of the spiritual undercurrents of the movement. And so I'm talking about transgender story hours. And that was a big thing in 2020. I think that was right after like Sorba Mari and David French got in that big fight about whether conservatives can be okay in a libertarian way with transgender story hours in libraries. Yeah. And now, of course, it's, exploded. There's, it's like at lunch and at school and stuff. But the idea being that, the ostensible reason that the left gives for doing that sort of thing is that we want to teach kids to not be bullies. It's an anti-bullying movement. And so you have to let kids see and sort of normalize it in their perception so that they don't grow up being mean. The second reason is that there might be a child in the room who is prone to this sort of lifestyle or identifying in this way, and you want to give them a path forward and show them how, model it for them. But the deeper reason, I think, is the fact that children are innocent of the lifestyle is creating a hegemony, right, of cis normativity or what have you, or sexual normativity. And the innocence of the child points to a standard, right? Yeah. It shames us. And we all have that when we are feeling guilt or horror, some shame about something in our lives. And then we're around someone who's really good and really pure. It makes us want to face our own struggle, or it should, and then triumph over it and be better. But if we don't want to face it, then it makes us angry, right? Innocence is the most offensive thing someone can say is the truth you're trying to silence in yourself, right? So, so I think that, for the movement, I think their innocence is an affront to everything that they stand for. Right. And so you have to target the innocence of children.
That's really good.
So people tend to react a lot to that. Yeah.
There's a reason when I was doing crummy things in high school, I enjoyed hanging around people that were as crummy or crummier than I was because it made me feel better. Yeah. I'm not like that. But that's exactly right. If I encounter somebody who's engaged in a virtuous lifestyle and I don't want to change, then they're a threat to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I often think that about these lovely women who've been lied to in this society. We'll have people who are watching who've had abortions, and God bless you, you're a beautiful woman. People have done evil things. Women who've had abortions have done evil things. Men who have faltered at their post and encouraged abortion have done an evil thing. But you think if you've done something that evil, like you've killed your child, you paid someone to kill your child, that's beyond wicked. You have two options ahead of you, right? You acknowledge the sin and repent. You don't even have to call it a sin if you're not a religious person, but you acknowledge the wrong and feel sorry for it. Or you double down on why this was a good decision and look at all the good things it's led to. And there's an enemy group who are trying to silence other women. And so I'm going to be an advocate for them. And so, out of those two options, which one seems easier? Obviously the latter.
But long term, it's the harder.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's why there's so much rage, right, at pro-life marches, and it's just, it's maybe an obvious point, but it's women who are deeply trying to quiet their own horror at with the act they've done. And same thing with the transgender movement. One of the things that will keep perpetuated is that the people who are complicit in it, the parents in particular, will take an immense amount of grace in order for them to look squarely at the horror that they aided and
you don't
abetted in
acknowledge
their
that you
own
just paid someone to
child.
butcher your child. You
Right.
don't do that. Holy crap.
Yeah, that's a big, hard thing to face.
Yeah, like psychological defense mechanisms are no joke.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Hey, I want to say,
I was about to say, since we're at a point, would you do the ad? But that's what you were about to say.
I was.
Look at how in tune we are.
Hi, everybody. I want to tell you about stpaul.com/Matt.
stpaulcenter.com.
stpaulcenter.com/Matt. There is a link in the description below. Emmaus Academy have a new digital platform with excellent Bible scholars and teachers who can lead you in different courses to help you love sacred scripture more. I have an account. I went through it. It's really beautiful, really high value stuff. So if you've fallen into a summer slump and you're tired of just binging YouTube and then regretting it afterwards, go to stpaulcenter.com/Matt and you can get 2 weeks for free and you can try out all the different courses that they have. So salvation history and the Psalms. Ralph Martin goes through his book. So it's a book study on his book, Fulfillment of All Desire. A lot of really good stuff, really well produced. And in fact, one thing, speaking about feeling threatened, when I signed up to this course, I'm like, yeah, sure, I'll do this Bible course. It's like, and a thing comes up, how many hours a week would you like to devote to this? I'm like, damn it, I don't know if I'm that committed. You have to commit. So they make you kind of commit so that it's this intentional thing that you're doing. So if you want to love Scripture more, except for the fact that you don't want to love Scripture more, this will help you want to love Scripture more, and you will end up doing it. I think it's excellent. I think you should check it out. stpaulcenter.com/Matt. Sign up over there for 2 weeks for free. If you don't like it, you can cancel it. Or you can just binge watch all of the courses and then cancel. If you want, you could do that. We're going to go on a break, and then we're going to come back and take questions from locals and super chatters. Thank you.
Any sinner is capable of being a great saint. And any saint is also capable of being a great sinner, a great sinner, a great sinner, a great sinner. Therefore, of character development is the realization of this power that there is in each and every one of us, for good and for evil, good and for evil, good and for evil, good and for evil. And the good Lord would have us lay hold of what is worst in ourselves. Do not think that people who have virtue and kindness and other great talents just came by these things naturally. They had to work at them very hard, at them very hard, at them very hard, at them very hard. Any sinner is capable of being a great saint, being a great saint. And any saint is also capable of being a great sinner, a great sinner, a great sinner, a great sinner. Therefore, of character development is the realization of this power that there is in each and every one of us, for good and for evil, good and for evil, good and for evil, good and for evil. And the good Lord would have us lay hold of what is worst in ourselves. Do not think that people who have virtue and kindness and other great talents just came by these things naturally. They had to work at them very hard, at them very hard, at them very hard, at them very hard. sinner.
Okay.
Oh, you're kidding.
No, we're live
I see.
now.
I get it. I get it.
Yes.
Took
All
me a
right.
minute.
So you asked me to bring whiskey, and so I did. And thoughts on whiskey? Do you like certain types of whiskey? You said you don't really.
So I know tequila and gin, but whiskey is usually when some male in my friend or in our circle will bring some, and then I will enjoy it. So I'm an idiot about. I know I don't like Maker's Mark.
Okay.
But
I'm of the opinion that all bourbons are identical.
Okay.
And whoever says they aren't is a liar.
Okay.
And a dirty one.
Okay. A pretentious one, maybe.
I think, pretentious, dirty liar too. Dirty's still there. I think that if the percentage of alcohol is the same and it's, let's say, bourbon and not like rye whiskey, then there's no difference. So I would gladly get a $12 bottle of bourbon over a $50 one, and I don't think there's any difference.
Good to know.
That's me.
Yeah.
And I'm right. So you should believe me.
I don't have a super sophisticated palate. So.
You're wrong.
He thinks I'm wrong.
Okay.
All right. Well,
with bourbon in particular?
So this is Blanton's. Again, it's as good as a $12 bottle, but apparently people are super into it.
Okay. You're going to waste it on my unsophisticated palate?
Yep. But see, I think there's a wide variety of difference.
Thank you.
Between scotches. I think I like peaty scotches, Lagavulin and that kind of thing. So I think there's room to have strong opinions about scotch.
Okay.
I don't.
What about tequila? I have strong opinions about
I
tequila.
really like mezcal.
Yeah, I really like mezcal too.
So I guess I have, what are your strong opinions about?
I like Clase Azul, the blue and white pottery. It's really iconic bottle. Looks like ceramic.
Okay.
Blue and white pottery.
Yeah.
Amazing. It's my favorite. Fortaleza. Excellent.
So when you drink different tequilas, I think I can tell too.
Yeah. I can tell with tequila more than any other spirit.
Yeah. So I want to say thank you to this local supporter, Flavio Correa from Tampa, Florida. We were just about to go live and someone knocked on the door and there was a parcel that arrived at the door. And so he sent us some whiskey. Not whiskey, but let's see, what is this? I'm originally from Brazil. I'm also sending you some cachaça. I don't know. Cachaça. I don't know. And I guess it's a Brazilian specialty spirit. So I'm going to try that, and then I'll try some bourbon. I was in Guatemala for 6 weeks this year.
Okay.
And so I was drinking tequila when I would drink, or I would have some mezcal, and I loved it. But I just got to a point where I missed bourbon. And scotch is not the same. I didn't want scotch. I wanted bourbon. Something nice about bourbon.
What were you doing in Guatemala?
We were just hanging out there. My wife she doesn't handle the winter very well at all. So we were like, let's go somewhere warmer. So we went and hung out there for a bit.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, well, cheers.
Cheers.
Here we go. Brazilian. Oh, wow. Holy mackerel, that's good.
This is really good.
Is it? This is excellent. So there you go. That's good stuff. So final thought on bourbon versus scotch. Bourbon is really good in summer with lots of ice because it's sweeter and it's delicious. But when it's like cold outside, a nice Lagavulin kind of
whiskey time.
Scotch. Yeah, Scotch whiskey.
If you're in the mood, you have to be in an emotional mood for this. I have to at least. But Ardbeg, I mean, there's so much peat in Ardbeg, but if I'm in the right emotional state for it, it's amazing.
If someone's just made fun of me and I need to feel better,
Ardbeg time.
I want to,
whatever.
Oh, this is really good. Thank you, whoever, for Flavio, for sending me this Brazilian spirit.
It's that line in Kanye. Drinking Ardbeg is, I put my hand on the stove to see if I still breathe. I put my hand.
I feel like this room feels like a whiskey drinking room.
Well, that's cool you say that. When I designed it, I wanted it to feel like a nook in a pub.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm glad you got that. I want you to try this after you've done that.
Okay.
But no pressure to keep drinking.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. You're going to take some questions from local supporters as well as super chatters. How do you deal, says Liesel, with corruption in Catholic schools? It seems like almost every Catholic, quote unquote, university nowadays has fully bought into wokeness with pride flags, trans activists, and pronouns.
You transfer. No, I don't know. I mean, you have to.
No, that's great advice, I think.
You have, if you're going to stick with it, you got to, I guess you have to link arms with other people and try to resist it. Write letters to the bishop.
No, I'm a big fan of abandoning things.
Yeah.
Like, oh, but my parents and grandparents went to this school. Cool.
Yeah,
It's now crap.
yeah,
Abandon it.
yeah.
It's on fire.
Yeah. That lineage doesn't mean that much with
No,
regard
it
to the
doesn't.
school choice
Especially
now.
if your salvation of your children are at stake.
Yeah. I've worked with some parents at schools, Catholic schools in particular, that have really tried to fight it. And some of them have had some success. And when I was just saying, get your kids out, and they had that exact quandary. They loved the school. They were like third generations there, and they fought it really admirably, but it takes a lot of effort, and you have to maintain a lot of effort. And parents oftentimes, once their kids graduate, they're not going to keep fighting that school. And so you have to keep that momentum going. And it's very difficult to have that be sustainable resistance.
Kyle Whittington says, it seems that when you push back against wokeism, the risk is total isolation and unemployability. How do you balance defending the truth and remaining prudent, protecting your livelihood?
Well, that gets back to that prudence question. So prudence, I love thinking about how much it can masquerade itself as something bad. Like when you were talking earlier about prudence versus cowardice, but there's also prudence versus fear. Like people oftentimes say, oh, you're being paranoid or fearful. We're like, no, I'm being prudent. So I do think that there is an element of prudence in, man can't just walk into his company and just tell the HR department that he thinks they're all bunk or something and declare his beliefs, but nor can he participate with lies, right? So if you can't go along with putting his pronouns in his whatever at the office or on LinkedIn or something. So I do think that you can't blow up your life, especially when you're supporting a family.
But don't participate.
But
don't
actually participate in
I
lying.
got a friend who lives in Georgia who asked me my opinion on this. He was part of a big company meeting, and all the white people had to talk about how they've experienced privilege. What would you suggest to him?
Oh, that's a difficult one. I think I would try not to be part of that at all because it's so toxic. That's just, it is such a toxic effort to identify yourself in a collectivized way. But I can imagine if the gun was, if you really felt like your job was on the line, there's a way to do it that is not speaking into a lie, right? You could say, there are things I've not experienced. There's truth there, right? There are things that you don't experience when you're white that you experience when you're black. That's just true.
And vice versa.
So you could participate in that without, I think, moral complicity. But I can also see where it would be really courageous and admirable if someone said, you know what, this is BS and I'm not doing it.
Yeah, this is BS. It's BS.
Yeah. And you've got ulterior motives,
Travis Goldie says, what do we Catholics do when we find ourselves allying with patriotic and conservative groups that react to the woke movement with wrath and hate? Who does that?
Yeah.
Do you know of one? I don't know. Then with virtue, how do you avoid losing charity for neighbor while taking on the left? Maybe that's a good kind of general question.
One distinction that I sometimes will make is that I think is helpful is, there's a scene in The Sixth Sense when you're introduced to the mental illness, Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Haley Joel Osment, I can see dead people. He encounters a girl who has passed away. Anyway, if you think about the disease or its mental illness, Munchausen syndrome by proxy, there are three people.
Okay, I'm sorry. You have to explain what that is. It sounds so cool.
Oh, sorry. I just assume people know.
No, I don't. People might, but I don't. Yeah.
So it's this really disturbing mental illness where a caregiver, oftentimes a mother, usually a mother, exaggerates and vents sickness in her child, and oftentimes causes it. So in the scene in the movie, the little girl's died, and she gives Haley Joel Osment, the character who can see dead people, a videotape. Give this to my father at my wake, have him play it. And in this videotape, you see that the mother was poisoning her food.
My gosh.
So there are multiple people in this story, the child, the father, and the mother. Mm-hmm. The child is a total victim of the poison and would have needed healing and help. The father was an unwitting participant. Mm-hmm. He was not complicit because he had no knowledge. And the mother was the sinister actor, or maybe disturbed actor. So I analogize that to the woke movement, that there are people in the movement who have adopted the poison, but they're really victims of this movement, right? Mm. Either through wounds that have been manipulated or through lies and, deformation that they grew up with. Mm. Then there are people who think this is a movement of goodwill, don't understand the actual ends, and maybe they have negligence and not knowing, but they're more sympathetic. They just kind of need to be enlightened. And then there are people who just need to be stopped. And I think that as Christians, we can make the mistake of seeing the victim as our enemy, or we can make the other mistake as seeing the people who are the sinister actors of people we just need to accompany.
Yeah.
We just need to befriend them. Some people just need to be stopped. So I think we have to understand it in that kind of nuanced way.
That's really helpful. It's a helpful analogy. Thank you. Yeah, certainly we can be unsympathetic. You can imagine somebody who's having to undergo all of this propaganda through their favorite movies, through the NFL, through the NBA, and they're just so tired of it that it makes them callous to somebody's real pain of gender dysphoria or same-sex attraction. And that's not a place we want to be as Christians. We want to love people and try to understand their stories. So that's good. But on the other side of the spectrum, there are enemies that exist. And it's funny to me that in the church today, I think I'm going to go out on a limb here. I'm not accusing anyone specifically, but I'd be surprised to see bishops say that there was as enemies of the church who are within and without it. And yet, if you look at that beautiful prayer on the miraculous medal, which you're wearing right now, it says, O Mary conceived without sin, pray for us who have recourse to thee. But the full prayer is, and for those who do not have recourse to thee, especially the enemies of the church and those we recommend to thee. So there are enemies of the church, unless you want to disagree with this private revelation. And I just don't see a lot of people calling those enemies out. I was gratified to see Bishop Barron speak strongly against those
the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence,
the gross people.
Yeah. And Bishop Strickland, he came out to LA and was part of the march.
So glad to see that. But we have to, in order to fight the enemy, you have to name it. And sometimes that, and you name the enemy not to destroy the enemy, but to protect the flock, and then to, if God will allow it, to convert the enemy, I suppose.
Yeah. When you have to look at things with reality, right? And part of that reality is that there are real enemies.
Erin says, I saw that some of your books are about theology of the home. What is that? Convince me to spend some money for the books, she says.
Yeah, so Theology of Home, we have 3 books, and we have a 4th one coming out now, which actually a lovely woman who works with us now, Emily Malloy, has written. So the idea is that, so my co-author, Carrie Gress, she is a prolific Catholic writer. She's written a bunch of books like The Anti-Mary Exposed. She's got a new book coming out with Regnery called The End of Women. You should have her on your show.
I would love
How
to.
Smashing the Patriarchy Has Destroyed Us.
Can you please put her in touch with me?
Yeah.
Yes.
But so we started Theology of Home with the idea that thinking about how we both are passionate about fighting things that are wrong, right? Feminism, wokeism, but that the ideologues have captured the culture so much through capturing the cultural imagination. And I think as Catholics, sometimes we write that off as kind of fluff, and we want to do our intellectual work and have think tanks and apologetics, all which are great. I'm part of a think tank and I love apologetics, but we can't cede that space to an ideological movement. So it was an effort to say, okay, we can't just tell what is good. We have to show what is good, right? People need to see something embodied in order to understand that it's beautiful. So the books we have a heavy emphasis on beautiful photography, showing families, showing fathers who are competent and strong and holding a baby, and women who are pregnant, and just trying to, and then the words are substantive too, talking about the meaning of home, why that's such a universal longing, and why we all desire it.
Her follow-up question is, how do you see women living out their feminine genius in diverse ways?
Well, in Theology of Home, too, we actually make a real effort to address that. So we profile a variety of women who are infertile, women who are never married, women who are religious, women who have a gaggle of children, women who are great-grandmothers. So I think that the common thread is that an openness to serving and being fruitful, that's a particular fruit of serving our Lord as a woman, is that we bear fruit in our lives. And it's not necessarily biological. It can be, through mentorship or spiritual fruits, but women, I think, have a specific desire to be vulnerable in a way that brings people into ourselves and into our homes, and then helps to transform them by us being instruments of what our Lord wants to do in their lives. So we contain, an old idea, but we hold people within ourselves, in our prayer life, in our minds, in our hearts.
Isaac, I'm not going to try his last name, gave us $10. Thank you so much. I just don't want to butcher it. I'm so blind. He says, can Noelle and Matt comment on stay-at-home dads like myself? I stepped into this role due to my wife's health issues. I often feel discouraged. I'm sure other men do too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that can be done well and beautifully. I think it's probably harder because it's just there's more present challenges, I think, to switching those roles up. But I think one thing that we have as Catholics that's different than Protestants is that when we talk about male-female roles, we often are talking about it more in a more deeply a deeper way. So I think it's not so much about roles and relegation. I think, like my husband, when we first got married, he is a far better cook, and he cooks most of the meals, even to this day. And I can be a can-do person about home improvement. So I'll like hardwire a light fixture.
So cool.
But I didn't feel like I was doing that. That meant that I was manly, or that meant that he was feminine. It just, we hold those roles in a deeper way. So I think that you can probably do it very well. And I would never say that there should never be a stay-at-home father. Sometimes circumstances just demand that.
Yeah,
of your
and
life.
I would say what you're doing, I mean, as someone who has a wife with a lot of health issues, like it sounds like you're stepping into a role that's quite sacrificial.
Yeah.
It might not be something you would choose, but it's something that's been chosen for you, something that's been placed upon you in a similar way to a woman who's infertile. It's not something she would choose, but a woman can bear that cross more or less heroically. And it's a difficult thing. I'm not comparing your staying at home with a woman being infertile. It's a different cross, obviously, but bless you. Like, I don't know. I think and it's got to be hard too if this fella's watching a lot of videos that like are really pushing back hard against the left narrative that men and women are interchangeable, right? And so they often speak in ways that like, if you're at home, like you must be a beta male or something like this. I just wouldn't listen to that. I think that's...
Can I ask a related question?
Mm-hmm.
So I was talking to a friend of ours the other day, Matt, about this topic, and he pointed out, and this is really interesting, and I'd never heard this point before, that for the majority of Catholic history in like the peasant era, like the Christendom era, both the man and the woman stayed at home actually, and they did the work together. Right? Like they were working on land in the home together, working on the home together. And the differentiation between men should go out and women should stay at home is actually an artificial one in of itself. And so I think I'm wondering if we need to be more careful as Catholics when we're talking about who should stay at home, that what we need to be doing is being more forward, that what we're actually trying to achieve is a family which is building a home together in different roles, because for the majority of Christian history it was both of them at home doing it together,
or a short walk distance. So it's like to say that the men should be going off to the office and the woman should be staying at home is not to be trad enough, you're saying.
Well, not even that, but like when we talk about it, we talk about it as if like forever, like men went out and women stayed in the home and stayed in the kitchen. But what did that look like? Was something more like what your friend and my new friend John Henry does, right? Like where he homesteads, right? Where like he's out doing the killing and the farming, and she's in the home on the other end of that. They're working, they're doing the same work at different points. And I think a lot of the women stay at home pairs it as if it's two different works. But I think that's where we get mixed up, is we need to start realizing that it's the same work being done on different levels and different ways.
And you can have that unity of purpose even if the husband does go to the office, right? I think in some ways that's where feminism really feeds off of an idea that the man's work in the office is his actual purpose, and then that slips into seeing as secondary his home life. And so then women think, well, if what you're doing out there is far more important, then what does that mean for what I'm doing here? And so maybe I should desire that as well. And so even if you are a man who is doing that more traditional role of going out to the office and the wife is staying home, there still is a need for both parties to see that their common shared goal and priority is the home life, and that the office is for the sake of that life.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Do I try the Brazilian?
If you want. Oh, wow. Look at you. All right, so here we go. Again, this is Jambu. He told me how to pronounce this, which was very kind of him. Cachaça. There you go. Let me know what you think of that.
Thank you. That's
Very
good. That's
different.
good.
I've never had anything like this before, so
I'm curious.
massive thanks. I'm curious too. Isn't that weird?
Oh, it's so different.
It's good,
But
isn't
it's enjoyable. Yeah, I like it.
Go Brazil. Thank you, Brazil. All right. Daedalus Project says, early on you were talking about how to navigate work friends. Matt said he's not sure the friend could handle it, but he would be willing to hear the guy out. I think this comes from the left being kind of decent at perceiving some social problems, but horrific at solving them. Where the right solves things, but so long as machine is functional, they don't go looking for problems. That's interesting.
I'm not sure if I totally understand the distinction.
Are those who we would typically consider on the right of the political spectrum,
More problem solvers?
are they interested in the social injustices that are taking place in their town?
Oh,
Or do they tend just to have a bigger
To dismiss
picture
them.
and just like write people off who are having a hard time as not working hard enough, Whereas
Yeah.
maybe those on the left, I think I got those right, are perhaps more tender-hearted
Right,
and
right.
are more open to
Yeah,
the sufferings of
there's
people.
probably
yeah.
something true there for certain. And that goes back to maybe a reactionary element where if you feel that social injustices are used as a manipulation tactic, then it's probably easier to become callous towards them. And that is something to be wary about.
Someone just said of the drink that we're drinking, they said it numbs the tongue, but it's not delicious. What does that mean? It does numb the
The Brazilian one? Yeah,
Have you noticed that?
my tongue's a little numb.
It's 93% alcohol. I should have told you that. It's not really. It's not really. It's not really.
I 100% believed you. I was like, what is happening over
You're
there?
like, oh no, dear Lord.
I'm pushing the off button now.
Get that off online. They're going to say too much.
So what stuff are you working on these days? Are you still like, do you feel like you've been kind of, I guess, sometimes people can feel pigeonholed into topics, even if they're very passionate about them.
Yeah.
Are you still as passionate about this topic as you were? Has it evolved? Are you thinking of going in other areas?
I'm sort of obsessively passionate about the woke stuff, but I have had in my mind for the last year or so to write a book about fatherhood, and it's something I've been writing articles and speaking about more. So it's hard to have that much fire in your belly to write another book. Book writing is consuming, and I want to make sure my family is okay with that. And but Carrie and I do daily work on Theology of Home. We've got a website that we maintain and a newsletter and aggregate email and store and original content. So that is a project that keeps me busy. And then public speaking is a project that keeps me busy. But yeah, I guess the book is the thing that is lingering in my mind. Like, when do I do that? And because I think a lot of people are thinking about it now. So maybe someone else who's far more intelligent will write that book and I won't need to, but I do really love thinking and talking about fatherhood.
Well, sometimes we read and study and write, and it can stress us out. And one thing that can help us with stress is hallow.com/Matt. Yeah. You get 3 months for free if you sign up over there. It's the #1 downloaded Catholic app on the web. It'll teach you how to pray. It'll pray through the rosary. It has sleep stories. It has My Catholic Lo-Fi and other beautiful chant and songs that you can listen to. It has book studies. It has daily meditations on the Gospels with Jeff Cavins.
I feel like we might have actually hurt his feelings
We might have too. We're about to release a video with Jeff.
in a couple weeks.
So Jeff, so we're going to release this in a few weeks, so people haven't seen this yet. So we had Jeff Cavins on yesterday, 3 days ago. Wonderful fellow. Very funny, very dry sense of humor. But he was playing like his daily meditations on the Hallow app, and both Thursday and I immediately were like, it sounds like you're performing. Like, it sounds like you're like a Protestant pastor talking like this. And I was trying to make an innocent note that, well, it's difference in like generation, right? Like, I think people my age and younger talk on a microphone, even to an audience, more like a podcaster. Like, they're having a conversation. They're not like, today we will talk about whatever.
Welcome to Pints with Aquinas at 10.
And so we said that to him, and he was like, then 10 minutes later, he's like, you really think I sounded like that? I'm like, we can't back down now. We're going to be honest. You asked us. So anyway, hallow.com/Matt. 3 months for free if you sign up over on that website. Please help me beat Laura Horn, who is also advertising Hallow, because she's only a woman. Hallow.com/Matt.
Honestly, she
Do you know
should just
Laura
have
I was just
Trent's
gonna
code.
say-
I mean,
She's just better than
head
me.
of that.
Her
She should
adverts
be.
are so much better. I have to somehow make. I don't know.
We should
Maybe
start
not
doing
by
a,
making fun of her. That's
we
probably
should
the
start
worst
doing
way.
a bit where she should, like, where we say that she should have to use Trent's code because he's the head of the household. They should have one code.
Yeah,
I
we could do that.
just discovered her because Trent was talking about her at this
How
conference.
did you discover Laura Horn?
Well, because he was like, subscribe to my wife. He just said that to the room in general, not to me in particular. But I thought it was a joke because I could subscribe to my wife. I don't know what that means. But then somebody said, oh, she's got a YouTube channel. So I went back to the hotel that night. I was like, I'll check that out. And I was like, unprepared for how adorable she is.
Adorable.
Adorable.
And hilarious.
Yeah, Laura, call me. We'll hang out.
Yeah. She's very, very good. She always texts me and my wife her new ideas, so we're always in the inn. We're always honored by that.
Sweet.
All right. Any other questions come up? Anything else you want to talk about?
There was one I sent you on Slack. I don't know if you want to talk about it.
Did I miss it?
Above the super chat. I'd read it before you read it out loud.
I'm okay talking about this because I have a lot of thoughts. Why are Christians for alcohol but not for cannabis, considering cannabis has a wide range of botanical terpenins?
I don't know.
That produce wildly different smells and tastes across different strains. Do you have strong thoughts?
I don't have strong thoughts, but my immediate thought, and this is maybe out of ignorance because cannabis is not something in my life, but it seems to me that you can drink alcohol more moderately, but maybe that is a comment of ignorance.
I think it is.
In college, it felt like when people smoked pot, it was just to get stoned.
Yep.
Or high. And
Yeah, I
alcohol
think
seems
you can
different.
regulate
Yeah.
cannabis intake or THC or intake in a way, certainly today, that you couldn't have maybe 30, 40 years ago because of how it's being produced.
Does the church have a official position on?
I would say no.
Okay.
I would say
It would fall under like the legal thing though. So if it is illegal to use it recreationally where you are, then you are bound
Right,
by that
the
law because
positive
that's not an unjust law.
Right.
I guess so.
But if it's legal,
So my thought was I was on Michael Knowles' show a while back, and the question of cannabis came up, and I made
You
a lot
called
of
him racist.
I made a lot of enemies. Yeah, I kind of did. I think a lot of our prejudice. So I'm going to change. I'm going to change what I'm. Here was my opinion. I have a different one now.
Okay.
So I was kind of the opinion that we are very negative about marijuana because I don't know, just it didn't come from Western society, and as we associate
I've
it with
heard
like
that opinion before, and I did
different cultures,
yeah.
right? And I was like, I don't know, just kind of like I don't use the word racist much, but like it kind of feels like even if you want to say that Western society is the best society, it doesn't mean we can't take from other people. And if your only argument is right. And I was leaving to the side questions about scientific evidence and research because those things get so political so quickly, and I don't know how to navigate them. So I said, okay, if we just pretend that if we don't bring the evidence into the discussion, because you could probably debate for 20 hours about how marijuana is bad for you or not as bad for you as you might think, right? And if I just say that getting high is a sin in the way that getting drunk is a sin, I was like, yeah, I think it's okay. Like I think it's probably okay to smoke marijuana. But I've changed my mind on that. And I have no good reason to change it. Well, you tell me if you think it's good.
So you were saying that it was similar to alcohol. Now
Similar
you
to
think
alcohol.
it's
Like, I mean, what we have on the table here, Noelle, is poison, right? It's flavorful poison, and it's really easy to kill yourself with it, actually. It's not difficult to poison yourself to death with this stuff.
Yeah.
And it creates all sorts of issues in the world, and it's,
makes people aggressive or...
Yeah. There's all sorts of evil things, you know? And so whenever people criticize marijuana, I tend to think that that can cut both ways, except for what you just said, but I think that's false. I don't think it's true that you can smoke and not be high. Maybe generally you're right. Like I think there's a point to what you're saying.
No, I was saying that when you smoke marijuana, you do it to get high.
Oh, to get high. You weren't saying if you smoke it, you will get high and there's no kind of intermediate steps.
I guess I don't know enough about it to make that distinction.
And maybe I shouldn't be talking about it either because I don't know enough about it either, but I don't know. I don't think that's true. I know people who smoke marijuana and not to get high.
Yeah.
But I think I don't like them. So here's what I mean about arguments that cut both ways. Like when I think about marijuana people, I think about people who are probably into anime and who have purple hair.
It's the culture.
I don't want to associate with them. But then if you think about alcoholism or alcohol in certain circumstances, you could also think of a variety of characters who are also equally unpleasant in a different way.
Yeah, so the question is it just that it's more normal? And so you understand alcohol to be a more social thing because it's socially more acceptable.
Yeah.
And maybe if...
So here's my argument against marijuana that's not convincing. I just think we live in a society where we like tearing down walls and banishing taboos. And I don't want to contribute to that unless I've got a really compelling reason. And so since marijuana has been taboo and... Yes.
Didn't I say this to you?
No, I know who said it to me. It wasn't you. You may have backed it up.
I feel like I said something very similar
Father
to you.
Gregory Pine, who basically laid this out for me. So I don't have a good reason, but I don't want to be part of that. Like it's like Chesterton's thing, like don't tear down a wall unless you know what it's for
know
first.
what's protecting.
So that's why I don't want to do it. And I suspect that we're going to see all sorts, not because I think it's intrinsically evil, like that's not the argument. It's just that I think it's probably not good.
Yeah, I think the cultural thing is a good argument. Especially because like if there's some like cultural norm in your society and you just want to tear it down and you're just okay with it being torn down because there's no problem with the reason, like if for marijuana, for example, like you can say, oh, there's no problem with it, this, and this, but like if it's a cultural norm in your society, it is a problem to tear down cultural norms. It's a destructive force, and especially when we see what is happening in our society when we tear down norms, I think saying that it would be a sin to contribute to the tear down of norms and the furthering of that in our society, then I think it's perfectly acceptable to say that, knowingly contributing to the destruction of norms in a society that is actively decomposing is a sin.
Right. Especially when it's obvious that there is a fetishizing of tearing down norms, Yeah. I mean, that's like the fetishizing transgressive behavior has to become boundary pushing because what's transgressive today is going to be boring tomorrow.
Everybody
is push it further.
Everybody's freaking out about your anime comments. I just want to say that I'm not pro anime, but I do think there are some good animes.
Yeah, no, I agree. No, I'm not anti-anime. I'd like to be because I think people who are anti-anime are cool, but I'm not.
Yeah. No, I think there's some. I have watched anime before and been like, this is entertaining. Yeah. I understand why people like it. It's like me and rap music. Like, I don't like a lot of rap music. Like, I don't like a lot of anime, but there are some of them that I watch and I'm like, okay, this is entertaining. Yeah. I understand why this medium could be fun to consume.
Is it something you watch or is it a game? A video game?
I love you. I love that you don't know what anime is. You are so much cooler than me on Thursday.
Anime is the Japanese
I know that it's, I knew that, but I didn't know if it was just a cartoon or something.
It's like a style.
Okay. Yeah, it's the art style.
But what if right now I gave a completely wrong definition just to blow up the comments? It's kind of like Tolkien-esque. It's always about dragons. It's always about dragons. And it's always set in South Africa. Just something like that, just to see.
No, I think there are some good animes. There are some animes that
I enjoyed One Punch Man.
What makes a good anime?
One Punch Man. I've watched One Punch Man.
Matt Walsh pretended not to like that recently, but I don't know. I don't think he was being truthful.
I haven't seen all of One Punch Man, but I've seen some of it and thought it was entertaining. I haven't seen all of Attack on Titan, but I saw some of it. I liked it. I thought it was really entertaining. I started watching Vinland Saga recently. I really like Vinland Saga. It's so cool. I'm going to show it to you. I think you'll like it. And then the Ghibli movies. I think a lot of the Ghibli movies are great.
Let us know in the comment section what you think of anime and give us your best argument for or against marijuana and state that at the top so we know what we're about to read.
That's a good idea.
Maybe. It would be good to kind of learn from people. What do you do for fun that's not impressive?
That's not impressive?
Yeah. So don't say like I read Dostoevsky in Russian or something.
I'm not in a very I've got one. Mm-hmm. I do karaoke.
That's awesome.
I have gigs sometimes. They don't expect that I'm coming, and no one arranges it with me, but I just show up and do karaoke.
That's your gig. yeah. And is this something you do like for fun with your husband after a few drinks? Like, hey, let's do karaoke, or
I do.
Are you part of some sort of club?
My husband does sometimes do karaoke, but it's more of my girlfriends and I.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you don't do that to relax, surely. I mean, it's a fun thing. But what's something you do to relax? It's kind of like a common thing that you do to relax.
Every
night, karaoke, 9 p.m. That's what I said.
I don't do that.
Accept it.
Something to do to relax. My husband and I just oftentimes, we like to go on, we do dates a lot. Because we've got babysitting age children for like the last 10 years. So we probably date too much.
No. I
We're
don't
just
think
like,
so.
do you want to go out again tonight?
I think it's probably more important that your relationship with your husband is terrific than you being fixated on your relationship with any one kid.
Yeah, I kind of think so too.
Yeah.
We prioritize that we have fun together.
Yeah.
So we like traveling together. So he'll often, when I have this type of thing, he would have loved to have come with me on this trip, but he's flying with the kids to meet me for a family reunion. So he had to be home. But he travels with me, not an insignificant portion of the time. And he'll just work from wherever. I've got a speaking gig. And but we have a fire pit on our deck. We go out there often and we'll sit with a cup of tequila and recap our day.
I like a cup.
Yeah,
Not a little
cup.
shot,
A
just
little
a gigantic mug
Yeah.
of tequila.
We've just got a tumbler.
One of those hats with the...
It's got a straw. And then we don't have to use our hands.
Yeah, I know. Who wants to do that? Use your hands for the pot. That's a joke. What shows or movies do you watch that you enjoy?
I loved Breaking Bad.
I'm so glad you told me that you sometimes cry when you laugh.
I know, because you've seen me cry.
Now I'm like,
yeah.
crap, did I say something that
No,
offended you?
my eyes water whenever I laugh. So
Tell me about your love for Breaking Bad.
I think I've watched the whole series 4 times.
Holy
Which
mackerel.
is a little bit.
No,
Can
I
you
like
use
it.
your time better, lady?
Who cares? It's good.
But no, I just loved it so much. I don't watch a ton of TV shows. I loved, movie-wise, I loved The Hidden Life. Maybe that's a little obvious Catholic thing to say, but I absolutely loved that
Remind me
movie.
what that was.
That
Franz
was
Jägerstätter.
the blessed, I can't remember how to say his name.
Franz Jägerstätter.
Franz Jägerstätter.
Franz
Jägermeister. Just kidding.
All right.
He was a Nazi, a conscientious objector, and was ultimately a martyr. And but the movie is stunningly beautiful. It's mostly silent, and so the sounds take on an importance that they wouldn't normally. And it's characterized by sort of like chimes, like they have the cowbells that summon them to go work in the field, like what Thursday was saying about that common life of the husband and wife that used to be united in that sort of work. And then you hear the church bells, summoning him to a life of orienting himself around the supernatural. And then ultimately, like the chains around his, the summoning him to a life of martyrdom. But
Wow.
it's really beautifully executed movie.
I haven't seen it.
So yeah, not a lot of I can't think of the television. I mean, the show I'm most obsessed with
Really?
is Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee. I've watched every episode because I fall asleep watching to it sometimes because it comforts me.
I love it. The best Norm Macdonald joke was, I'm going to say it and you're going to know what it is, and you can feel free to cut me off, is where he's talking about Bill Crosby.
Yes.
Yeah, people say the worst thing is the hypocrisy. That's the worst thing. I disagree. You disagree? Yeah. I think it was the raping.
Because what rapist isn't a hypocrite? Like, show me the rapist who's like, I
like
sure
to
do love
rape.
the rapist.
It might be
I know it's not okay to say
unacceptable,
that, but at least he's not a hypocrite.
That's right. No, it's I love that man. I love that
him.
man. Bless him. I
Love
mean, I never
him.
knew him, so I guess I can't say I loved him, but
Yeah.
it's hard. Like sometimes, like what I find tough about Norm Macdonald is he is so beautiful that when he gets dirty, I get really disgusted.
I have the same reaction.
Because it's like a loving uncle who you love, and you
And
like,
also
I
it's like,
love
ooh,
you.
ooh, ooh.
But then when he talks like that, you're like, it's not good in any way. I wish you wouldn't have done that.
I have the exact same reaction. And I think, I should be okay with this. He's a comedian, but yeah, it's uncomfortable.
Favorite Norm Macdonald joke or quote or?
I do that Bill Cosby one sometimes, like at a party. I'll whip that out. So you might have exhausted my repertoire, but everyone I guess loves the moth joke.
Nice.
I love the
Got a bear joke I could tell you.
Oh yeah, let's hear it.
I'm just joking. I just want to see Thursday get upset.
A beer joke.
I just told her I have a bear joke I could tell
Are
her.
you going to tell
I
the
won't
bear
tell you
joke
the bear
again?
Why do you love bear? Oh, because
a
you
joke.
told it so many times.
Yeah, he
Can
doesn't
you just
like
tell
it.
it now so we can have it over with?
No,
You're gonna
because
do it
no one
later.
wants to hear the bear joke.
I was wrong. I mean, I'm not wrong, but
I'm never wrong.
You're
I'm
like,
not
I'm
sorry.
sorry.
I'm like Andrew Tate in that way.
you brought it up. Everybody disagreed with me. They thought the bear joke was hilarious.
Oh.
So you should tell it again. I want to see her reaction.
We're gonna, like, we have 500 people watching now. We'll be down to 200 by the time I'm done.
They're like, damn it, the bear joke.
Yeah. So this bear walks into a bar and he goes up to the bartender. He says, "G'day, mate, I'll have a beer." He says, "Freaking you are not allowed in here, okay? And I'm not going to give you a beer." He's like, "Oh, is it because you can't bear to be around me?" No. Is it because I'm unbearable? He went, no, it's not a bear thing, okay? It's because you came in here last night, you got drunk out of your mind, you made some inappropriate words to the waitress. You know, you smack Bill in the face. Bill's over in the corner, he kind of waves. It's like, you ran up a tab for $400. You're not welcome here. Get the hell out. Bear says, fine. So he turns around to leave, and the bartender just has a moment of kind of sympathy. He says, hey, listen. How are you doing? He's like, how am I doing? I'm freaking fine. He's like, listen, like, I know what it's like to be sick and tired of being sick and tired. You used to come in here and you were happy, you know, you had that little bear girlfriend and she had a ring on her finger and you were happy, you know, and then you started coming around here, but she wasn't there anymore and you're on your own, and I've just seen you get increasingly angry, you know, and the bear interrupts him. He's like, what the hell would you know about my life? And so the bartender pulls out a little coin in his pocket, you know, and it's like a 7-year sobriety coin. He's like, I might know maybe more than you think. He's like, I used to be married, I had a family, I destroyed all of that, burnt the whole thing down. My wife won't speak to me, my kids are ashamed to be around me. I got to live with those decisions, right? And when I see you, it's not irreversible. And the bear has a moment of silence, and the bartender says, listen, tell you what, how about I meet you tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. at that coffee shop, and we'll chat about this. I'm open to chatting about it if you're open to. He's like, the one on Walnut and Conyers? Yeah, that one. The bartender says, just go home, don't have a drink, and if you're still open to it, meet me at 9 and we can talk. And the bear says, all right, fine, maybe I will, maybe I won't. He's like, all right, good, but what's with the long pause? He said, I'm a bear.
I don't get it.
You have to say, I was born with him.
Oh, I'll try it again. He says, this is always the best jokes. What's with the big pause? He's like, I don't know. I was born with them. I screwed up the punchline.
I had to tell the punchline for my least favorite joke.
I got a great joke.
I want a bonus.
So, do you have a good joke?
That's like the moth joke.
Yeah, I know, but not as good. But if Norm told it, would be as good.
Right. I mean, I honestly, the Bill Cosby one is the one I tell the most. I don't really have a good joke. The thing I like the most about my sister and I always talk about this because we're so similar. We're so different in so many ways, but we both realize that we both wish that we were comedians. And it's not that we're funny. It's just that we love that attribute in a human person so much. Yeah. Although we're kind of funny. Maybe this isn't a good representation of me though, being funny. But the thing that I love about comedians is not so much their stand-up, it's how they are in person. And I think that's why I like comedians in cars getting coffees, because it's fascinating to me, someone who is so naturally disposed to see what is funny in life, do that off the cuff. I feel like that's the most endearing quality. Yeah. And so stand-up, although I admire it so much and I can understand how incredibly difficult that is and how much there's an art form to it, it's not as endearing to me as just listening to someone be funny in a conversation. I
have a lot of respect for comedians who don't feel the need to constantly try to be funny.
Yeah.
So when you've got like people like Gaffigan on Joe Rogan's show and you don't get the sense that he's trying to make you laugh, you're like, okay, he must be quite secure in the fact that he's very funny and doesn't need to continually be funny.
Yeah.
You know what's funny about men and women is this, if a man's funny, it's very attractive to a woman, even if he's ugly. But if a woman's funny and ugly, that's not appealing to a man.
Well, maybe it's the ugliness that's no.
What
if a woman's really beautiful and funny?
That's great,
but it's unusual.
But I always consider my wife very funny. She's very funny.
And she's beautiful.
Yeah, she wakes up in the morning, and before she's fully awake, that's her best jokes. It's weird. It's like when she's not trying.
Yeah.
So the other day, I got up. It's like 2 a.m. I just threw my legs over the side of my bed, and I went, I don't know why I said it out loud. I don't announce when I'm going to the bathroom, but I'm like, I was going to go to the bathroom. And then I sat there for a bit and she's like, do you want me to show you the way? It was brilliant. I just love her. She's really, really quite good. What did you say earlier that you found? Oh, even today, where you said you wanted to have whiskey.
Yeah.
And she's like, wait, I'm not okay with you just drinking whiskey with some random woman, unless she's fat. Is she fat? I went, no. She's a lovely woman. Well, I don't know. I might beat her up. She's very funny.
Yeah.
The other thing I think is, but I don't think that attractiveness is as important for women as it is for men.
Right. I think that's right.
That's why I mean, like, a very funny man who might not be terribly attractive can be very attractive by being funny.
Funny or successful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing I think is interesting, and I'd like pushback. Don't not push back and then me get in trouble and then you say I never meant that.
Yeah.
The other thing I find interesting is if a woman's crazy.
Sorry.
If a woman's crazy but attractive, I would imagine most men are like, I can deal with that.
You remember the crazy
But
hot
if a
scale?
man, real quick, but if a man is crazy and attractive, no woman wants to be anywhere near that.
Are you sure? Ted Bundy got.
I'd have to think about that more.
Okay, you don't make a Ted Bundy joke.
Yeah.
He was the one.
That's
That's
we're going way
different.
too far.
He was attacking people.
No, he seduced
mean, like,
all the women.
I mean, I don't mean
crazy.
crazy in an obvious way. Like someone who's like psychopathic
Oh,
or
you
something,
mean
it
like-
might not be immediately clear.
Okay.
But if a woman's kind of like crazy and attractive, I think a man, I'm not saying me, and
Okay.
I'm not saying men should be, but I just think,
Maybe they're more prone to overlooking the crazy, but I do think
Yes.
that a virtuous, prudent man is going to be a bit repelled by that, a craziness in a
I
woman,
agree with
even
that.
if she's really
no,
attractive.
100%. I'm talking about people partying.
Yeah.
Okay. I
Yeah.
thought you just meant crazy in general. I was like, Ted Bundy was definitely crazy. And because he was attractive, he had a lot of success, unfortunately, but because of how that ended.
Well, now we've got a woman in the studio. What do you think men worry about when, say, dating or asking people on dates that they don't need to be worried about? Or what emphasis do you see them putting on themselves or the other that you're like, you really shouldn't be doing this? I'll give one because I've been thinking about it, and then you give another. I just think like women do not care that you're shredded.
Oh, muscular?
Yeah, in the way that you care about it.
Oh, yeah. I
You
actually,
see?
I found that
Yes,
distasteful.
100%.
Yeah.
And I think Hollywood has lied to us about this.
Yeah.
And so men get super into it, but it's kind of like a beard. It
No.
exists for other men.
I
It's
think
not
that
for
most
women.
or maybe it's generational. I'm older, obviously, than maybe the women who are dating now, but that was never something that was, in fact, like if a man was too muscular, it was unattractive to me.
Yes.
What about like Brad Pitt Fight Club?
Brad Pitt what?
Brad Pitt Fight Club, like that physique.
Like lean but muscular.
Yeah, like hypothetically, if I knew somebody hypothetically who wasn't me,
but
who
you're
was trying.
attracted to him not because it's because he's Brad Pitt and he's gorgeous. It's not because he's.
I mean, but Brad Pitt Fight Club, like I'm not. I might have
Yeah, I
a
just
friend.
think
tell
that the
us.
physique
We're
of a
here to
man
learn.
is far less important than the physique of a woman
100%,
to a man.
dude.
100%, dude.
Yeah.
Well, what's that movie that had that quote that women become attracted to the men they're in love with, and men fall in love with the women they're attracted
Yes.
to? What movie was that?
I don't know, but it's good. I like that. It's a good line.
Have you seen the Hot Crazy Matrix, by the way?
No. What
You
advice
haven't?
would you give to Thursday who's single and wants to marry Brett Cooper?
No, you
Oh, Brett
brought
Cooper
I thought the
Daily
joke
Wire,
was
is that-
dead.
Super
I thought
into
the
her.
joke
He
was
never
dead.
stops talking about
That's
her.
false.
Text me photos of her. It's weird. Actually, it's getting weird.
Yeah, she's
That's
a
all-
pretty
all
pretty
lies.
Maybe out of his league too. I keep telling
All
him that,
lies.
but he just doesn't listen.
maybe
All
out
lies.
of his league.
Definitely.
You told me the opposite.
So it can't be too much of a lie then if we're communing about her. So what? No, not about Brett Cooper. That is a joke. But what advice do you have like men like him who are like trying to find a good woman?
What advice do I have? Gosh.
And boring advice is good.
Yeah.
Like what I just said, the thing about like no one cares about you being shredded. Like calm down. I think men need to hear that a little bit.
I feel like the two things that most come to mind, and they seemingly might be contradictory. One is that a man is self-contained in a way that he doesn't feel a need to be impress people. I find that to be a good quality in a man. It feels more manly to me. But then I also, actually, maybe these are the same thing. I also appreciate confidence. But maybe it's the confidence that makes you less prone to try to impress people.
I told Kyle this the other day on confidence.
Mm-hmm.
I've started doing something recently, ambiently, just in my everyday life that has made me more confident.
Carrying pizzas and
carrying pizzas
strapped to his chest or strapped to the side of him.
Yeah,
carrying,
and it's made me
things,
more confident. And as a result,
carrying
what
pizzas and
right. I see what you're saying.
Right.
I get it.
I like that. Just makes me more confident in general because I feel like more just like a sense of capability.
Yeah, with a pizza.
And it's made me less awkward around women. I've noticed
because you know you can like harm them if you need to.
No, It's just like a general sense of confidence and
I think
capability.
that's true. I think that's
now.
probably why like dressing well at an event makes you more confident, and it's the confidence that's more attractive, not so much what you're wearing necessarily. It might be both, but
being excellent at something, I think, is an attractive quality in a man, right? Right. I'm asking men.
Is it?
I don't know. I'm trying to think about what.
It's unfortunate for me because I'm not excellent at anything, but
I'm sure that's not true.
Thanks. Say that more.
My husband was very aloof, which I think drew me to him.
Ooh, define aloof.
Like I remember we met in college and we were good friends, and then we started dating. Sorry, I'm rocking. I would be eating dinner with a group of friends, and he'd walk by and he'd just be like, "Hey," and walk off. And then I remember my guy friend turned to me. He's like, "Wait, that's your boyfriend? Why didn't he come over and talk to you?" I was like, "He's got something to do, I guess."
I think and I don't know if this is a temperament thing, maybe more than a woman thing, but I know my wife probably finds it attractive when I'm like not terribly interested. That's wrong. Well, to put it very bluntly, like neediness is gross.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Oh yeah.
So when you talk about
something on
aloofness, or that
Right.
kind of maybe what you're finding attractive is that
Not
lack of
needy.
neediness.
Yeah.
Like he's got something he's doing.
Yeah.
He doesn't need you for the adventure of it. He doesn't. You're not the adventure. He's got an adventure, and you're welcome to join him, kind of thing.
Yeah. I think
Yeah,
that's
go on.
right.
Yeah, when women like feel like when women need constant attention, it actually like it's unattractive. I feel like because there's something about being a man I find that I like. Not that I like need to be able to like neglect neglect a woman, but like I need to know that like if something comes up and I need to do it, like she's not going to be emotionally harmed and like
Offended.
despise me for like being like, oh, I got to go take care of this real quick, or like I can't talk to you 24/7 because I'm doing things that human beings do.
Yeah. Neediness and performativity, we were talking about earlier. I think those two qualities are two unattractive qualities in both sexes.
How would you advise Thursday to ask a woman out? What? Don't interrupt. Let her tell you. She might have some good advice. So if he goes up to some random Sheila in a coffee shop or something.
I think it's probably best to start with some level of friendship, right? You don't want it to be too, I just met you at an event and would you like to, I don't know if that's the way to go now. Because I feel like women, I feel like establishing some degree of friendship first is...
It shows you're not a threat, maybe?
Yeah. Or that you're not, you're not a threat, or I think women can become suspicious maybe, like what's your I don't know.
All right, you writing this
I
down?
don't know.
I mean, it's recorded. I'll just go back and listen to it later if I need to.
Please, I don't need to write.
I think being a good
it.
conversationalist is right. That's what women are going to find intriguing, and then it makes it more natural to go on a date because you're like, oh, I already experienced you as being someone who I like discoursing with.
I also feel like if you were to cold ask somebody out, like without much interaction with them, they're likely to say no. And then once they've said no, unless you're willing to pursue her, it makes it a lot easier for her to say yes if you're in the context of friendship.
Yeah. And the idea of pursuit, I feel like without some degree of knowledge of the person, I mean, if I think this is so long ago, but I remember feeling like that felt really artificial to me. If someone pursued me who didn't really know me, it just felt like, well, you don't, what is this based on? This feels false, know?
Kyle sent a super chat that's hilarious.
All right, I will read it. Kyle Whittington. Did you slack it to me or?
Nah, do you want me to just read it?
Yeah, go for it.
So Kyle says, everyone says the bear joke sucks. Kyle gave $20 and said, everyone says the bear joke sucks, but I disagree with money.
Kyle.
So based on American politics, that makes me right and everyone else wrong.
And then someone said Brittany Miranda. Brittany Miranda says it's big pause, not long. Yes, people are upset.
The good thing about the bear joke is that it's funny along the way.
Is it?
Yeah. I mean, I was laughing. I was eyes watering.
What I like about the joke is that it starts funny, the unbearable thing. That's
it's
funny.
got a nice premise. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you're like, okay, this is promising. And then it gets interesting.
Yeah. And then you're like,
especially if you can tell it well, which I did not. But it
No,
is,
you did a good job.
we should link to it below because John Henry told it much better than I did.
Am I going to be...
I'm so impressed with you.
If I just do
impressive.
It's not a whiskey tasting if I only taste one.
I find when women smoke cigars, I find that really cool.
Yeah.
I don't mean attractive.
Can I say
I mean
something?
cool.
Oh.
When they smoke cigarettes, I find it gross. But when I find a woman smoking a cigar, I find that really cool. Right, go on, say something.
When women I was watching Tucker on the Let's Go podcast, which I don't listen to a lot of that show unless they have somebody on that like is interesting.
You know what it is.
And they were talking about how it's attractive when women like dip or smoke.
Oh, gross.
And I was like, 100% I agree.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know what it is.
Dipping? That's disgusting.
I don't know what it is.
Her mouth will taste like an ashtray and Dr. Pepper.
I don't know what it is, but she whips that like the tin out and
Are they
starts hitting
Dr.
it.
Pepper
It's like,
flavored?
I don't know. Dr. Pepper. I mean, when the first time I ever had dip, I thought this tastes like Dr. Pepper and manure. But all right, this is a different one of those kasha musha nushers.
somebody wants you to tell an LSD dragon joke, and I have no idea what that is.
So
You're
this,
like, oh, I got one in my back pocket.
I got one. Here you go. So this this fella walks down the stairs and he says to his grandma, "Grandma, have you seen a bottle of pills that say just medicine, says LSD?" And she's like, "Forget the bottle. Let's do something about this bloody dragon."
That's a great joke.
So that person knew about this joke when they asked for that.
I don't know, but that's my joke.
no coincidence.
Here's my favorite joke. I have a lot of jokes. Some are like really offensive. The ones I've told you I shouldn't tell on air probably, hey?
If you have to ask, yeah, probably not.
I'll tell you after. So this lady, this widow's the woman, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Widow is at the funeral. The husband's in the casket. And she's standing next to the man's best friend. And she says to him, "Would you mind saying something?" So he gets up and he gets the microphone and clears his throat. And he just says one word, plethora. And then he sits down. And the woman puts her hand on his shoulder and says, "Thank you. That means a lot." Oh, I'm so glad you like that.
Punny
I
joke.
heard that joke a lot. Can I tell the joke that my priest told in the homily once? That was
sure.
yeah.
I guess we should be safe. Go.
It's a bear joke. So this Protestant minister, this rabbi, and this priest, this Catholic priest, are arguing over who's the correct religion, right? And they decide the way to figure this out is to try and go convert a bear, right? And so they go, okay, we'll come back in a month and we'll figure out who was the most successful, and whoever's most successful must be right. So they go and they try to convert this bear, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And
I've heard this, so look at her because I'm not interested.
They come back, right? Sorry, nobody can see, but there's a computer screen between me and the guest, so I had to lean over. So they come back a month later, right? And the Protestant minister, he's got his arm in a sling, and they're like, "Oh, Reverend, what happened?" He goes, "Oh, he's doing good. He was really feeling the spirit." And then I tried to dunk him in the river, baptize him, and he didn't like that. Smacked me. I had to run away. Broke my arm. That's no good. That's no good. Father, they look over. Priest in legs and got an arm that's wrist sprained. And Father, what happened to you? What went wrong? He goes, we were doing good. I was working catechism with him. He was really feeling, I could tell he was getting, the catechization was working well. And then I tried to confirm him, and some of the oil got in his eyes. He freaked out. He threw me. I broke my leg and sprained my wrist. And I got away though. It's not too bad. And I look over at the rabbi, and he's in a full body cast, basically. He's just messed up. And go, "Rabbi, what happened to you?" And he goes, "Well, you know where we have to start."
Are you able to turn all the microphones off, but just leave the cameras rolling, and I can tell him my most offensive joke?
Yeah.
Is that something you can actually do?
Yeah.
And I'm going to cover my mouth so no one can look.
All right, everything's off.
Are you 100% sure?
Yep.
I really, really need you to be sure.
Hold on. Chat. Everybody spam ones in the chat if you couldn't hear what Matt just said. That was a test.
They want to hear it. They're like, yeah, we can't hear you.
Oh my gosh.
Spam ones in the chat if you couldn't hear Matt.
And they can't hear you say that, right?
No, I just turned mine back on.
Oh, golly. Man, this is brutal. You might hate it. You might be very offended.
I'm hard to offend.
Are you? Okay. It's not off. Sound is on.
Sound is on.
Bastard. You bastard.
You're a little saboteur.
You
All right, give me ones if you couldn't. Yeah, ones. Okay. Okay, chat, here's what's about to happen. I'm going to turn the mics off, and Matt is going to wave at the camera. And when Matt waves at the camera, and he's going to say a test thing. And when he says the test thing while waving...
We can't trust them.
They're all screwing with us. Wait, lying is a sin? Haley just said, wait, lying is a sin. Yeah, they're all lying.
Is it off?
All right,
I have no
Haley.
We'll just keep drinking, telling jokes. My friend Chester.
The Chester joke is hilarious and you cannot tell it.
You have a nice history of jokes, I can tell.
I got nothing left. Do you have anything else you want to say?
Yeah. I don't know. Talk to Thursday.
Interviews are very different these days, aren't they, on like Catholic platforms than they were 20 years ago?
Yeah, for sure.
Well, what were they like 20 years ago?
20 years ago, they
like
were
EWTN.
Stagey,
Yeah.
you know. Welcome back. Today, we will be speaking to Jennifer.
Right.
And maybe they were right to be a bit
they were
more.
always named Jennifer.
Always.
That was the
right?
right thing.
I hated that. All right, bye.
Okay, I'm turning it off.
All right. And then I'll tell the other